machine after the lunch.
All right. Thank you. You're welcome. I'm at 32.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, we're checking people in right now. I got my scanner going, Riley's talking to people, and Mom's looking up the names of people because we got all these people here. Look at them.
All right.
How's it going?
Hi, Riley.
You got them up?
Hi, Darling. Good to see you.
Hi, Frank. How are you? Good to see you too.
Hey, sweetie. How are you? Good to see you.
Do you like a pen?
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's great.
Here, would you like a pen?
Oh, I'd love one. Thank you.
My name is Andy Hudson. I'm from Franklin, Tennessee, and I'm just looking forward to having a good time and learning some Disney history.
Oh, same thing. Go ahead. Tell us who
Hi.
you are, where you're from.
I'm Jefferson Crutchfield from the beautiful community of Orlando, Florida. Ex-Disney person for 30 years and now no longer associated with the company. So I'm looking forward to reliving some memories.
Oh, we're just having everybody line up over here, and then we should be
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Hello, do you like a pen?
Yes, thank you.
Let's put that right on right now. Got it. Look at this. It's official. I just buttoned up.
Hi, I'm Bruce Bryson from McCoy, Florida. I'm here to hopefully learn some more about the Disney lakes and the boats.
Lots and lots of fascinating information, some jokes, maybe people get wet, you never know.
Looking forward to seeing the remnants of river country.
Oh, thank you so much.
I have a pen.
Oh, thank you.
Terrace from Melbourne. Just hope to get a good view of the lake and nice day for it.
Are the rests?
Yeah, I have another.
Thank you.
Well, and there's, like I said, there's thunderstorms every day at 3 o'clock.
Inside the boat at all times.
No flash photography. That's again. That's a we want to go video lighting.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay, come on up here, Jason. Have a seat there.
Yeah.
Or do we have to stay seated?
What's the boat rules for us?
All that.
I think we made it for $3. Permission to come aboard.
Mission granted, sir.
All right.
There was more people here.
Hello there.
I put on a few pounds at night.
How are you? Welcome aboard.
Thanks.
Right. You should be first. Welcome, Wilson. Good to see you. You code for the ship. Just so you know, don't feel like that's only night. Good to see you again. Aloha.
All right, let's see what the count is.
What do you call it when 60 people are on the pier waiting to get on the boat? Peer pressure.
How old is she?
She'll be 16 in January. These boats were originally the Animal Kingdom Discovery River Cruise, in which there was virtually nothing to discover. And then they were going to be, because they were supposed to build the Beastly Kingdom, if everybody remembers, or fantastical beasts and dragons and stuff, which they never built because they had to put all the money into a Yeti. And so then they tried to jazz it up by making it the Disney Radio Cruise on the same route. For some reason, Disney Radio is big in Africa. And then they just bolted all together after a couple of years and said they're not going to run the boats anymore. And then they somehow ended up over here at high crowd times, running transportation from the Magic Kingdom, the Seven Seas Lagoon, and Bay Lake. And then they started running Pirates and Princesses cruises on them, which they do at nighttime. It's a hard ticket event that leaves from here, and you get to meet Captain Hook and Peter Pan. They have a little dessert party inside, and then they take the kids and Kids at Heart out around here and do some pirate stuff. I've never done it, so I don't know, but there are videos online. And I know we've told the story for those of you who listen to the podcast, but the short version is I knew these boats were here and what they were. I'm like, they were the old Discovery River Cruise ones. And then when we did these tours a few years ago, the pontoons weren't exactly the best way to do it, but we did it. And afterwards, I said, we got to get one of them big boats. And after many, many months of talking about it, to describing the boat to Todd, no, he's down here for his Easter break last year, and he says, guess what's pulling up to pick me up at the Polynesian? And he sent me a picture of this boat. So we chatted with the captain, we found out who we needed to talk to, and now we have all of you on our boat. So we're all in this together now.
All right, guys. Welcome to another live edition of the Retro Disney World Podcast Lake and Lagoon Discovery Edition Tour. This is boat 3. We've done this twice already. We know what it's like to be cast members and say the same thing over and over and over again, so just bear with us, because we will be going for our libations later on. But my name is Todd McCartney. I'm the host of the Retro Disney World Podcast. As always, I have with me Mr. Hal Bowers.
Aloha!
Brian P. Miles.
Greetings and salutations from Florida, the Sunshine State.
Now, JT Kuzier could not be with us tonight. His wife is pregnant with their second child and due very soon, but we do have Jason, who is our webmaster and artist in residence. Hi, everybody. We want him along for the ride, so we're going to be going over a whole bunch of different stops. We've got just about an hour here. We'll get back, because if we go a minute over, they charge us a lot of money. All right,
So, was anybody awake in the middle of the night when we accidentally tweeted out our big reveal prize for here? My 2 insomniacs, good. Anyway, our artist Jason over here has spent with us the last 8 months recreating, hand drawing a 1970s souvenir from here with our own twist and flair to it. So this is Jason's big work, is a souvenir map, the vacation kingdom of the world. Each of you will be getting one of these when you take off from the ship today. On top of it, the version you'll get have been signed by Jason and have a special silver seal here to differentiate it from the people who are going to buy them for Christmas gifts and Hanukkah gifts and Kwanzaa gifts, and oh, Jason's are numbered as well. So Todd will walk down the aisle and show it to you, but that is what he's been working on, and it is really a work of art. So we'll be referring to it throughout the day. There are 71 hidden Easter eggs on the map. And there will be a prize in January, I believe it is. Todd's going to put the contest details online for those who can identify the most, if not all 71. Having said that, today we'll give you about 15 of them throughout the tour, so you can count down and try to remember them.
yeah, there's a lot on there. Jason was working on for, what, 8 weeks, Jason? Something like that? Yeah, and it was a lot easier to produce than our fountain. It went a lot smoother. So we left the contemporary. I want to get a show of hands. Who remembers swimming in the original square pool? Oh, we got a couple hands up. That's the most I don't know about. Yeah. Yeah. So the contemporary. That's right. There was a diving board. The original pool was square and round. We have both on the map. The square one was back where the other pool is now, and had that same concentric square pattern in the center. Our first stop here along the way is also on your left-hand side, this piece of land that juts out, which was one of the spots for the Persian resort that was going to open a little bit after Walt Disney World opened to the public. Now, it was going to be a monorail resort. There's a lot of different maps out there that show it being serviced by the monorail a lot of different ways. Sometimes a spur line, one through Tomorrowland, was it? Was there one through Tomorrowland? I don't think the plans were ever really, set down in concrete, and quite literally, there was nothing set in concrete. After the oil embargo of the 70s and all the, oil problems and everything, the money just wasn't there. They had to put Fort Wilderness in at the end, and unfortunately, we never got the resort. But the land is still here, and Hal will point out a little bit more about the land and the clearing, and also what this entrance is and how it relates to a riverboat that used to be in the Magic Kingdom.
Yeah, so one of the very interesting things to me, at least, about this land over here, if you go look at Google Maps, the land that was cleared for the hotel is still clear, and it's used today as a construction staging area. So you can literally go and build the hotel there today if you wanted to, because the land is still sitting there ready to go. Now, up here, you'll kind of see these two orange markers by where that little guy is heading out. That's where we're not allowed to go, but back there is the dry docks where these boats are stored, and also the big ferry boats that take people. And there's a story that we unfortunately have to tell. about a riverboat that used to run at the Magic Kingdom. Do we have any like old Magic Kingdom people here who went in the early 70s? There used to be two boats. Yeah, there used to be the Admiral Joe Fowler and the Richard F. Irvine. Now today, the Liberty Bell is the Richard F. Irvine, so that boat is still running. But unfortunately, something happened to the Admiral Joe Fowler, and that is, it was taken over here for a refurb in either 79 or early 80. Someone neglected to turn on the bilge pump, and it sank partially in the water. So someone actually put out a photo after years and years of it like half sunk in the water, and then they decided, okay, we'll pull this thing up by a crane and fix it. And as they pulled it up with the crane, they actually split the hull in half because it was mostly fiberglass, and they just decided there was no way to fix it, so they scuttled it. So they moved it to backstage EPCOT for some years, and then eventually dismantled it. Supposedly buried parts of it out somewhere in the woods here to get rid of it. But some of the pieces supposedly got sent to Tokyo Disneyland and are actually in their boat today that goes around their rivers of America. So it does. Yeah, and 30 minutes after you ride it, you want to ride it again. So that's a very sad story. But there's lots of good stories here too. So we are heading over to Rile's Island, which then also became known as Treasure Island, and then became known as Discovery Island, and now is nothing. It's just a big island that sits there. But one of the real famous stories about how this plot of land was selected by Walt Disney, of course, there were lots of economic studies done. He hired people from the Stanford Research Center, Harrison Buzz Price. They did a lot of research about whether it should be here in Ocala, a bunch of different places. But there's a story when they were doing one of the last flyovers and looking at Ocala locations and here, he flew over and he looked down and he saw this lake with that island and said, there, that's the place. So part of the reason that we are here today could be because of this island and this lake. It was a privately owned island for years and years, and the reason that it was called Rile's Island is because the guy that lived on it was named Riles. Apparently he was a bit of a recluse. There's also some weird stories about a pirate radio station or something coming off of it at some point. But if you look over past the island, to where Fort Wilderness is, there was actually a working vacation fishing camp here. And we'll get to one of the structures that was at that fishing camp in just a moment. But let's see, what else do we want to talk about the island? Oh, the birds, yeah. So, did anybody actually go to Discovery Island? Okay, so we have so remember there were flamingos and Galapagos turtles and all kinds of some rare stuff. Macaws, they had a bird show, which shows one of the reasons that we'll get to a band that got to interact with those birds. But there were a lot of things like spoonbills and herons and stuff that when I came here as a kid, I thought were incredibly exotic. But as I moved to Florida, and I live in a coastal area now, I came to realize those birds are actually just here. They were just birds that lived in Florida, and someone said, oh, well, we'll just set up a little habitat for them and probably trim off their feathers so they can't get very far. But they were Florida native birds, so they were very economical in how they put that attraction together. And there is actually a very sad bird story from that time period. Discovery Island was one of the places where a species died out. There was a bird called the dusky seaside sparrow, and they had two of them, and they were brought to Discovery Island to try to breed them. And I think I was in high school, so it was in the mid-1980s when this happened, maybe 85 or 86. And I remember it actually made the newspapers back then. And unfortunately, they just could not keep those birds alive, and a species died out here. There's a lot of deaths here.
But it died happy.
Yeah. It had a great view. Many happy people came and watched it.
So I spent some time in Discovery Island when it was a penitentiary. No. I went there a number of times when I was little in the 1980s and even into the 90s. It was a neat little place to go and really kind of get away from the Magic Kingdom for a while. What was neat is they had a lot of boardwalks with little streams of water running under them, going out to the beach. We're going to talk about the beach a little later because it has a really, really cool spot. It relates back to a rock band that I'm very fond of, so we'll talk about that a little later. But it was a really relaxing place, and I see somebody's got a drink there with a straw. You wouldn't be allowed on the island with the straws because it was one of the first parks where the straws were outlawed because of the animals and a safety issue. So as I pointed you out, you didn't think you were going to be caught today, but please keep that straw in the canister, okay? So, but yeah, I went out there a number of times, and we're going to come up on the right-hand side. There is the original dock used to jut out into the water a little further, so you're going to see that first. Further down, there's an additional dock that was added sometime later, right? Yeah, more of from a maintenance perspective. What is really interesting is that when we get over to river country, and the captains here were telling us that in one of the hurricanes, a tree came down on the island. And what it has done is it's actually exposed some of the aviary netting that is still out there today. So we'll be able to see that when we come around. So we'll point that out to you once we get past, once we're done with river country. So we should be coming up in just a second on the left-hand side. And we'll get, this is, I'm sorry, I'm all reversed today. Starboard, that side. So this might be the closest. Oh, we got a question. Well, there you go.
That's Todd's NPR voice. If you listen to the podcast, a lot of times you get, hello, this is Todd McCartney.
It's really great to see you. Thank you. So what was I going to say? Yeah. All right, so here, coming up on your right, this is probably the closest you're ever going to get. I think the Disney police boats come out if you get too close to this island. So there you can kind of starting to see some of the pylons. It's right beyond these reeds here. You can see the little hut. If you look, there's a little A-frame popping up. And we'll cut the engines here so everybody has a chance to see. Take a look. So that's where you would get off the boat. The dock came out to about here, right? How? Yeah, just to about here. You would walk back in there. There were turnstiles and, little snack places to go. I know that Brian said on earlier tour, if you look really carefully, it might be a Urban Explorer out there somewhere. So we're going to talk, as we move on from here, we're going to talk a little bit about a cabin in the woods that is becoming synonymous with us.
So on podcast episode numero uno, that's number 1 for you non-Spanish speaking folks. Straight ahead, beyond the dock, we'll show you a little closer, was the original location of what's come to be known as Roy's Cabin. And that is when the Disney bought the property. There was originally a fishing lodge there, a little cabin that was used as a fishing camp. And after Walt died, there's a series of pictures which are in the Florida Memory Archive and on the Orlando Sentinel website of Roy Disney and some Disney executives visiting that cabin and using, because that was the point where you could access the property, and using it and then boarding some boats, going out around here down some of the canals to survey it and get an idea of what they were dealing with. And the original thought was that the cabin would be rehabbed and used either for Roy Disney and his family or for Disney executives or for some purpose, but it was found to be structurally unsound and not savable. So it eventually was demolished around 1969, 1970, and it is now slightly to the left and behind the settlement trading post, but we'll point it out when we get over there where the original cabin was. But yeah, so we mentioned it on our first episode. Hey, that's where Roy's Cabin was, and it kind of became a thing. We had a guy on our last cruise that had a Roy's Cabin t-shirt on, which was great, thematically accurate. But now we forget a lot of episodes to mention it because we have so much other stuff going and we're getting older. That's why we have the cheat sheet. That's right.
All right, so we're going to swing around and we'll point out the Roy's Cabin spot in a second. A couple things to notice here. On the right-hand side, there's a clearing. You can see some green area. When this was a fishing community back in the 1960s, that area was still clear, and really Disney didn't do much with it In fact, where Roy's cabin was and the road leading up is the road that you take today to get into Fort Wilderness all the way up to Settlement Depot. So that actual route hasn't really changed very much since the original time. So you can kind of see some Spanish moss on the left-hand side where the dock ends. Right about in there is where the cabin was. So what we'll do is we're going to come around here, we're going to spin the boat. So those on the left-hand side will get a good shot, so those on the right can get a shot now. And after we do that, I'm going to tell you a little story about the end of this dock. How many of you are religious listeners to our podcast? I know the Miles family is, so keep your hands down. All right, we got some hands up. So a lot of times when we talk to former cast members and stuff, we ask them a lot of different stories. And one of the things we always ask them for is, if you have a Dick Nunes story, could you tell it to us? Now, Dick Nunes was a very prominent figure here during the construction and even afterwards. And he has a very strong personality, and as a result, a lot of his stories are very strong in certain ways. And there are some that we've heard that, right, Brian, we would not repeat. There's been, yeah, there's some we won't talk about. So we asked a gentleman who was a lifeguard at the Polynesian, tell us some stories about river country, because he also eventually worked over there. So he told us the story that when they were first designing river country, there was an idea for a plunge pool, and it was there. They did create it, and it was a pool where you would go down a slide and you would plunge about, I don't know, anywhere from 11 to 15 feet straight down into water. And it sounded like a great idea, but water parks were new. Nobody had really done this before. So how do you design that? So one of the ideas was, and Dick sort of said, go over. Roy's cabin, right on the left, kind of to the left of where those golf carts are. If you really want to be a geek like us, you can go to the Florida Department of Transportation website, download the 1969 aerials, map them up with Google Maps, plot it out, get the exact GPS coordinates, and realize nobody cares but us. So, back to our little Dick Nunes story. So at the end of this dock, I'm sure it's changed many times since back then, he says, go get me a water slide from one of the other resorts and bring it out to the dock. So what does he do? They do that, they bring it out, and they start putting crates underneath it to lift the water slide higher and higher and higher. And he points to the lifeguards and says, go down it. So they climb up and they go down until they realize what the maximum peak was that a body could take. And it's on our map. We have a gentleman, Brian will bring it around here. Here he is here. There's a crate holding up the water slide, and he is spread eagle going out into the water. So I think maybe sandbag testing would have been a little more appropriate. So our next stop, as Brian comes around, our next stop up here is going to be the shoe tree. And the great thing about having real Disney captains on board is they confirmed all of the rumors to say, yeah, we can really talk about this, and it's not fake, it's real. So I'm going to let, who talked about the shoe tree? Oh, that was Brian.
So coming up here on your left is this little tree out in the middle of the water there, and a lot of people would pass it and not notice that in addition to the vegetation growing off of it, there are sneakers, there are trees, shoes growing from the tree. And the legend, confirmed by the folks behind me, was that when a water captain reached retirement, the last day ceremony would be coming out here and tossing their shoes, a pair of their pearly whites onto the tree. So yes, that's true. And on our first cruise today, the guy says, yeah, that's true. I tossed mine up there 3 years ago when I retired, and he pointed out where his shoes were. So we're going to get nice and close for you. You'll be able to get some shots of it. And then Howard is going to talk about cypress trees.
So just a little so that is a cypress tree. You'll see we have a bunch of cypress trees out here. And this area was once known as Cypress Point, which is a name that was allegedly going to be used for a hotel complex that was going to be built over here at one time. But this was kind of the northern end of river country. And when you were done with the water slides and you had your fun drop in 10 feet, there was a series of boardwalks that would come out here along the trees and just get some really nice, beautiful, some views.
I like the guys that are dancing on the water down there at the bottom.
Yeah. There's one really tiny pair. How do you? That's just it.
We're heading over to Riverboat. We just got breaking news from the 23 folks. It just came in on the Twitter machine. The new resort name has been announced. Anybody take a guess?
Think of a really bad hotel spa.
Everybody know? It will be the Disney Reflections Resort. And that will go, this is probably one of the last few times you're going to be able to see this spot. So I will turn it over how to talk a little bit about River Country.
Oh, we didn't get to do the joke this time. Oh well, no bad. Yeah, we should do it.
I did the musical introduction last time. River country, river country. I don't know any other lyrics, so I just sing river country.
All right. So over here on your port side, you're going to get the best view of river country that you will ever get in your lives, and especially or ever again. So one of the things I want you to look at is look at the water line. You'll see there's this little low wall, like about a foot or two there. So one of the old rumors about river country is one of the reasons it closed down is because the water from Bay Lake was actually used it just like ran right into river country. And that's not true. There was actually a whole system of air pockets in this little wall that separated the two. Now it is true that the water did get pulled in and was filtered and was used inside, but there was not a direct connection between the two things. So yeah, so you wouldn't be in there and have like a fish go by you. So what you're looking at very close to us was a walkway, part of that walkway system that I was talking about. If you think about old pictures, it's like, imagine that none of these trees were here and this was just like a big open flat expanse. And then the area behind that where you see those other things poking up, those were the things like the little rope swing and some of the things like out in the lagoon area that you would play on. You can see there's kind of a central building back there. Oh my gosh, I can actually see one of the like ride signs. This is hilarious. Yeah, we're gonna spin around so you can see it. But if you look sort of on the right side, you'll see those rock drop-offs that we were talking about. That rock work is still there. Yeah, coming around the other side. It just blows my mind that this is still here and you can see it from this boat. Yeah.
If you look off to your right as we swing, there's a lone lamppost left on the right-hand side. There it is. And it just kind of, I guess it illuminates something. Yeah, it was one of the walkways. So what's going to happen here is we're going to turn the boat back to the left, the port side, and we're going to talk a little bit. Oh, this is good. On the port side, right on the left here. If you look over there, right in the center of Discovery Island, you can see the aviary nets I was talking about earlier. You see them there? So lots of birds were contained in that area at one point. All right, so rock bands in Disney World. This is one of my favorite locations on this tour because I have an affinity for a rock band that played here, right on the shores of Discovery Island. Who knows the name of the band? Rile? You're one of us. Somebody in the back raise their hand. They know. Pablo Cruz, run that back to the band down there. All right, you get a sticker. That's right, Pablo Cruz was on one of the Walt Disney World television specials back in the 70s where they sang the song Worlds Away. It was the song from their new album of the same name. And they hung out here on the shores of Discovery Island when it was actually really beachy and nice white sand. And they hung out next to a boat called the Walrus, which is very, very hidden and also has been pretty much destroyed in one of the recent hurricanes that we pieced together on this day. Of one of the trees has fallen down on top of it. So you're not going to see much of it, but one thing that is really good is go out and watch the video of them doing this. It is absolutely fantastic. They're in water sprites and different aqua larks and boats around, but the best scene is we're on this beach, they're banging away at the keyboard, and they're dancing and slapping themselves. There's birds on them, live birds, and the birds are not cooperating, so they're kind of annoying. And the one guy, he moves the bird away, and the bird flies back, and he's like, yeah, no, this is great, is an absolute hoot to watch. And I think we'll give you a little rendition of one of their songs.
Well, they sang Worlds Away, but their most famous song, okay, so I'm gonna try and point it out. If you see this grove of trees here, there's a darker area. You might be able to see there's a piece of wood that is round shaped sticking out in the front there. It is very hard to see, but it's right over here. I'm pointing at it. And that is the only piece of the walrus that you can still see. It was very visible a year ago, yeah. But trees have fallen and stuff has happened, and it's hidden back under there now. So that is where the walrus is. It's hiding. But Pablo Cruz stood there, and by the way, the walrus, did you talk about what people did on it? Yeah, so it was like a play set. What they did, in addition to filming Splash 2 there, we learned, it was a play set. So kids would come over when they were bored looking at birds and squirrels and stuff on the island. They would come over there and they could play. And your parents could let you jump off like a 9-foot lift onto the sand, completely unprotected. Because it was the 70s and that's what you did to have fun. Propped up with crates, right. But Pablo Cruz, they sang Worlds Away, but that's not their most famous song. Their most famous song that most people know is Love Will Find a Way, that goes, but it's alright, alright. Once you get past the pain, your love will find a love again. You keep your heart open, cause love will find a way. Thank you. We didn't license that, so don't put that on the internet.
That's all you got. All right, so we're going to do a little Q&A before we move over to Seven Seas and Lagoon, and we're also going to do some quick trivia. We also have a gift to give away, 2 gifts to give away, actually, because this is the final tour. We can give everything away. We don't want to bring anything back on the airplane. So first, Q&A. Who has any questions about anything we've talked about? Nothing that we're going to talk about.
You did say that this lake existed before Disney came here. Was it spring-fed? Was it river-fed? Or is it just...
Yeah, so, well, famously, this entire area is built on swamp. So before the connected waterways, you know, this series of canals is built, it's like there was some natural movement. But yeah, there are a lot of spring-fed lakes here. In fact, a lot of the water that was used around here just in general was spring-fed. So when 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was first opened, it was actually filled with spring-fed water. It was not chlorinated. They had to actually close it down and do it later because they found it started to grow algae and stuff. So, when they created the Seven Seas Lagoon, and probably this boat knows this, but like this part existed. What we're going to go on to the Seven Seas Lagoon was actually completely man-made. The original plans for the Vacation Kingdom here were to actually have the hotels right around the Magic Kingdom. But when they started to do soil tests, they discovered that that area was not buildable. When they needed to fill this up with water after they dug it out because this did not exist, and the story is true, it's like when they were building, since the Magic Kingdom is built on the 2nd floor, they basically took all the dirt from where the Seven Seas Lagoon was going to go and pushed it all over to the Magic Kingdom and surrounded the utilidors with dirt to build it up to that 2nd level, which exposed some nicer dirt. They actually went to one of the other springs that were here on property and just started filling up water trucks. Dennis, there's some lovely filth down here! And filled up all of the Seven Seas Lagoon with spring water. So originally it was, if you look back at old photos, the water used to be beautiful. Which one? Some trivia. Okay, so we're gonna do a contemporary question. All right. What was the original proposed name of the contemporary resort hotel? Yes, Contempo Bay. Very good, very good. All right, super easy. All right, so who designed the tile work that is inside of the 4th floor? Mary Blair. Very good. All right. All right, some more easy contemporary trivia. What is the name of the 4th floor area that you stand inside? What's that?
Concourse?
Oh yes, but what kind of concourse? Give me the whole name. The something concourse. The Grand Canyon Concourse. All right. Who is the original sponsor of Space Mountain? RCA. All right, very good. Yeah. This is where I just look at things and then think of stuff. Right. My boyfriend's name is George Glass. All right. Oh, what was the first color monorail that went on the monorail line? Anybody know? It was orange. Orange was the first monorail. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Oh, okay. Yes, there we are. So that's right. So,
now, what island are we passing?
You know what? I keep forgetting Blackbeard Island, right? And I keep getting these wrong. All right. So all of the islands. We talked about Treasure Island, but all of the islands in this little system all have names. So there's Blackbeard's Island. That's like Shipwreck Island, which I don't know. That sounds kind of dangerous. I don't know. That one's okay. It's okay. I know these guys. This is our 3rd time. They're like, that idiot. I tell him every time, and he never remembers. So. In the center here, you may know this name because it's used again today. Castaway Key is the big central island. So that name sat here since the 1970s unused, and now it's a big deal. And then Beachcomber Island is the one that the wave machine is attached to over in front of the Polynesian. So yeah, across from Surf Rider Beach, because that's where you were supposed to ride the waves into when you did your surfing. Oh, right. So over here on our port side is the what was supposed to be the site of the Venetian Hotel. So in that initial 1970 slate of hotels, it's like this was supposed to be sort of very much what like EPCOT looked like. So it was supposed to look like Venice. There were Campanile Towers. There was supposed to be shops and gondolas, and it would have been a lovely time. And then we had several things happen, like the gas crisis in the 1970s that stopped all the hotel building. But the other thing that happened is they went and did some site soil samples, and they would put those big cement pilings down, and like they would just disappear. So they determined that the site was actually unbuildable. And then another 10 years or so go by, and Michael Eisner becomes the president of the Walt Disney Company, and he says to himself, man, we need to build some more hotels around here. There's a really nice spot of land over there. I'm going to have you guys design this thing called the Mediterranean Resort, and it's going to be fancy. So let's go do some site samplings. And once again, it turned out they could not build there. I don't know how they forgot that from the first time around. So that probably costs a lot of money for no reason. But what we just found out very interestingly is this little turn right here is still known as Venetian Point today. So the name still lives on. And we're going to come up to another thing here in a second. So this is one of those, we troll a lot of like Facebook groups, and this picture popped up one day a couple of years ago of these waterfalls. And we were trying to figure out where in the heck are they, and then finally someone had been here for a long time, showed us that over on this island, as we come around here on the starboard, you'll see how it kind of comes out as a crescent. There were actually artificial waterfalls that were out here for quite a few years, probably about maybe 10 feet tall, not super huge, gray in color, powered, so they were powered, they moved, and then so the water would go down it. And then when they would do the cocktail cruises in the evening, they would either have characters or Polynesian dancers stand on the waterfalls, and they would make that part of the show as you went by.
Wondering, as they're drinking cocktails, is there really a giant poo dancing there on the island?
And one of the things that blows my mind, having grown up here and gone through the 1970s, is these islands always were surrounded by white sand beaches. Now it's really strange to me to look by and you see like everything's overgrown, but back then this was all very manicured. Oh yeah,
I'll talk. So this area right here, we had a great question on the previous tour, and I wanted to bring it up here. They asked where was the water ski show done, and it was actually done right here where the bungalows are. So when you wake up early in the morning, you can't wait to get the Magic Kingdom from the Polynesian, or maybe you drove in and you're anticipating getting into the theme park, and you're out there on that berm waiting. They would entertain you a little bit with a water ski show. And now, mind you, it wasn't just people in bathing suits out there. We're talking full Pluto get-up, full Goofy get-up. You know, taking on a couple waves, doing some little jumps, wigging up. Yeah, they wear special water suits. You imagine if you took a tumble and you got wet, you were one wet dog. I mean, you were weighed down. Yeah, like wearing a carpet, as Brian says. So, but that was done right in this area. There's always a picture out there too. This is Dick Nunes, you know, on the. Remember that one? I don't think it's him. But I'm going to turn over to Hal to talk a little bit about another vessel that used to patrol these waters.
So one of my favorite watercraft that is no longer here was a Chinese junk that went by the name of the Eastern Winds. And this is one of these things that I love history because really it's just rediscovering what everybody already knew. And we started to see these pictures pop up of this thing. And I was able to track it down. It was originally an item that was sold in the Neiman Marcus catalog in 1969 during their big Christmas thing where they would have all kinds of wild stuff. Apparently they sold 10 of them. The original price was like $12,500. One of them ended up in Dallas, Texas, and I don't know if it was purchased or if it was part of the promotion because Neiman Marcus was based out of Dallas. But it was later purchased by a company in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and it was run out of the Los Olas area down there as for cruises, and we actually have pictures of people on the Eastern Winds in Fort Lauderdale. Disney purchased it, brought it here, and it was moored out in front of the Polynesian. You could buy a ticket and do like a nighttime cruise with cocktails and stuff on this beautiful Chinese junk, and that lasted for a few years. But then they started running into some problems because the hull was apparently wood and was made for salt water, so when they brought it into a freshwater, it started to ruin it, so they did a bunch of things like putting metal coating on the bottom to try to save it. It had beautiful teak decks, and then they decided to stain it, and that absolutely ruined the teak. They had problems with people, there was just several abusive type problems. Eventually they ended up just kind of mooring it as a decorative thing off the shores here. Some guys in an airplane in St. Pete saw it, bought it, had it shipped over to the east coast of Florida, put in the water, did some refurbishment, and then it got sent down to the Virgin Islands where it was used for cocktail cruises in the Virgin Islands. And we have not been able to find anything about it since that point, so it's a mystery.
Yes. So, looking straight ahead is the Little Longhouse, which is where the VIPs stay. They've been on check into Bally High. Bally High. Anyway, that was not notable particularly until a woman named May Pang in 2009 wrote a book. She was John Lennon's girlfriend in 1974, 1975 during his Lost Weekend period. And in the book, she wrote about him signing the papers to break the Beatles up while they were staying here, and included a photo of it in the book. And the story is that after 5 years of legal wrangling, they were ready to, the four guys in the band, sign the paperwork to dissolve Apple Corps and the Beatles group. And the meeting was set for New York City the week of Christmas 1974, the last week in December. And John didn't show up, and they called him and said, "Hey, are you coming to this meeting?" He says, "No, I'm in Disney World. Send the papers to me here and I'll sign them." So guy got on the plane with the papers, flew down here, handed them to a carrier, and someone on our first cruise happened to work with the guy who 2 years ago was the carrier in 1974, who took the papers to John Lennon's room. He signed them, he handed them back to the guy, and the guy ran them back to the carrier from New York. So it did actually happen there. It was a story that wasn't known until May wrote her book in 2009, but now it's known, and you can find John Lennon signing the papers on there. We are approaching an outcropping of rocks up here on to your right. We'll come closer to them. That is the former location of the Wave machine. So, well known by folks who listen to us that Dick Nunes wanted a surf riding beach. He wanted a wave machine. He wanted to, being a California guy, he wanted to simulate the beach going experience for Disney World guests. And so they built a machine out here that would generate waves. We interviewed one of the guys that actually built it and invented it and wrote it up. And they built it and turned it on, and in 2 days it had eroded the beach over there so badly they said, let's turn that off.
There's a couple other interesting anecdotes about it is that it used these big flappers and the hydraulics and everything. It just didn't work. It made a lot of noise. Now, one of the holy grails is nobody has any footage of anybody actually surfing the wave or working. We have a still photo, right, from Eyes and Ears a number of years ago. But Brian and I did contact CBS. So I'm going to let him tell the story because there's footage, but nobody can get it.
Yeah, so in 1974, the Mike Douglas Show, which was a daily variety, afternoon variety show that was based out of Philadelphia. Mike Douglas had a daily show, and what Mike Douglas' shtick is that he would have one guest for the whole week and would spend the week, and John and Yoko were on once, or Debbie Reynolds or somebody would be there with him, and they'd tape 5 episodes over a 1 or 2 day period and then broadcast them syndicated around the country. Mike Douglas spent a week here in 1974 filming all 5 episodes at the Walt Disney World Resort, because as you know, Walt Disney World didn't advertise back then. They accepted any kind of promotions they could do with TV specials or with guest shots like that. So Mike Douglas came here, and part of the Mike Douglas show was they turned the wave machine back on just for his show and had some cast members surf their way into the beach. And so there's footage of the wave machine, which is great false advertising, but come to Walt Disney World and use our surf. Didn't work. Never was on. But it was on for the show. So we knew this existed. VCRs, video recorders back then, were uncommon at that time. People had them, but not a lot of people. So there isn't a private copy of that floating around. But we knew it existed. We knew the dates. We even knew the episode numbers and the broadcast dates. So Westinghouse was the Philadelphia-based company that produced the Mike Douglas Show. Through a series of corporate mergers, the Westinghouse Library was owned by CBS. So, being resourceful people, we said, well, we'll contact the CBS archives. So we contacted the CBS archives, and they got back to us pretty quickly. And what the woman said was, I'm the director of the CBS archives, and our fee for a 10-second clip is $30,000. Now, you don't seem like the kind of people that would spend $30,000 for a 10-second clip. However, she said, even if you were, it's such a short clip that we wouldn't even bother, we don't have the staff, and we wouldn't even bother researching it, licensing it to you. We later learned, when we shared this story with some of our D23 friends, they attempted to do the same thing, and were essentially given the exact same answer, that nobody's gonna, they'd want you to license the whole show and pay them $500,000, and nobody's gonna do that. So footage exists, but if it exists, we'll never see it.
So that's a call for all of you out there who are at flea markets. If you see film or photos that says Florida 1972, buy it, send it to us. You never know what's on it. That's where we've got a lot of the orange-bird dancing and everything else. All right, so I want to talk about this little 90-degree corner here. You can see where the land juts out and makes pretty much a 90-degree corner and shoots down here past the Grand Floridian. When Walt Disney World was being built, there was another hotel that was being planned here. Does anybody know the name of it? No takers? The Asian resort was going to be right here. Now, what's interesting about the Asian, it was a square resort. It's on our map. Very, very square. In fact, the piece of land, when they were building the resort here and dredging out, Hal's got it there, when they were dredging out Seven Seas Lagoon, yeah, they created this piece of land for the Asian resort, assuming that it was to be coming in the next couple of years. That never materialized. The Grand Floridian followed in around 1986 or so. But what is left is this actual 90-degree corner, which was going to be the original footprint of the land for the Asian resort. So what we're going to do here is we're going to come up, we're going to talk a little bit about the monorail beam and a funny story behind that Tom Nabby told us. We'll make a right-hand turn, head back, talk to you a little bit about some monorail beams that went amiss. And we'll end up there with some photos and some additional trivia. The hard question for the two big prizes at the end, right? Okay, yeah, we'll do that on the way back. All right, so we're going to tell a little story about Tom Nabby. Who of you guys here has been to our other events or other tours? Okay, so some of you may have met Tom Nabby last year. So he's a Disney legend. His name's on Main Street above the cinema. You can check it out. He's a great guy, and he's got a lot of historical aspects of Walt Disney World. He worked here during the construction, was in charge of the monorails. Now, we talked a little bit about the Admiral Joe Fowler earlier, you know, whether or not those smokestacks could come down. There was some concern possibly with the Admiral Joe Fowler that it was not going to make its way, and right coming up on the left, you'll see it, through the canal that leads to backstage if they need to get it in there or bring it back out. So the decision, you can kind of see it coming up into play now, right into view on the left, right to the right of the dock. Now it's a pretty tall part there for the monorail, but nobody ever did any measurements to figure out what was going on. So what does Tom do? They go in the workshop and they get a huge piece of rope, they get a giant nut, and they walk the beam, 28 inches, they walk all the way up to the top. They go up top there, they take the rope and the nut and they throw it over the side, get that nut just to touch the water, they mark the rope and they pull it all back up. Throw it over their backs, go back to their office, their trailer, they lay it out, they measure it, they had 6 feet to clear. But you know, the interesting part of the story is it really tells you how quickly this place was developed, how there were a lot of different departments. Nobody had taken on anything like this before. So you've got one group building a boat, maybe not talking to the monorail people, or building a beam. So, you know, I joked on the other cruise, we maybe say I have to go out there with a hacksaw and cut the smokestacks off if they didn't make it. But so that's it's a great little story, and the nut and the rope, they're on the map. That's one of your 71 things. Oh yes, yes, Brian reminded me too. Also on the point where we talked about on the Asian there was a Pirates and Pals cruise. Now if you were a parent and you wanted to hang out and have a nice dinner at the Polynesian, you would add your kids in tow and you want to just have a really nice dinner with your significant other. Well, you could send your kids on this Pirates and Pals cruise, just like the Pirates and Pals cruise they have now. Except this one was only for kids. The lifeguards at the Polynesian and River Country were some of the cast members that would run it. Now, the interesting is, they would put you on a boat, the kids on the boat, they take them out and they tell them that there's buried treasure, and they give them a map. And they go out to this point here, right by where that 90-degree point was at the Asian, and they would bury a treasure chest or a cooler filled with ice, Coca-Cola, candy bars, you name it. The kids would dig it up, drink that, go back completely buzzed on sugar to their parents. Guess what we did? Yeah, that's our next event. We're just gonna bury coolers all around. You have to come dig them up. So these kids are pumped up on chocolate and caffeine, and you know the parents are thinking they have a nice night out, but really at the end they didn't. But it's a neat little story, and that's another item you might find in this map. So I'm gonna turn it over to Brian to talk a little bit about. Oh yes, Hal needs to talk about the electrical water pageant first.
All right, so you've all seen this, I'm sure, from the monorail. I know as a nerd, it's like, I love looking at it. So back there is the little cut-in that takes you, where they store the electrical water pageant. It's like next to the parade building, and then that whole channel actually runs around to the rivers of America. So one of the early ideas for that Fowler boat, like I was talking about, did we mention? I can't even remember if we mentioned that it was going to be used for cocktail cruises. Anyway, so one of the ideas of the Fowler was going to be used for cocktail cruises, and they would bring it underneath. That's why they had to measure the monorail beam. They would bring it out at night. And we actually found a model of it docked in front of the Contemporary, like out at the water there. So there's a functional channel that goes back there and then around to the rivers of America. But we love the electrical water. I mean, who doesn't love the electrical water pageant? It's still running more or less exactly the way that it was. It started out actually as a one-night only thing. It was for the day that they did the dedication of the Polynesian. They had a luau outside with King Leonidas from Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and a big party. And then it was a Bobbiani production. He did the whole all the stuff for the grand opening ceremonies here. And because it's a Bobbiani thing, that guy loved America like nobody I know loves America. every Bob Yanni thing ends with some kind of tribute to America. The Main Street Electrical Parade, the thing at the end of like For America, Bob Yanni. When he did the Super Bowl halftime show with Disney, and it ends with fireworks and a tribute to America, Bob Yanni. And that's why the electrical water pageant ends with the tribute to America, because Bob Yanni. But when they ran it that first night, not only did you have, you know, the dragon and then the America tribute, the actual barges that those are on were lined with fireworks. So they shot fireworks off of it. Plus they had ultralight gliders that shot fireworks and some balloons. It was crazy. But it went over so big that it went apparently dark for one day, and then the next day they just brought it out and ran it as an entertainment thing. Because it cost like 5 cents.
And back then, the parks were only open for one 8-hour shift, usually 9 to 5 or 9 to 6. So they only had one crew. And then they would close, and what they expected you to do was entertain yourself at night. So they had the dinner shows, which we'll talk about at the top of the Contemporary, and they had the luau, and in 1974 they opened the Hoop-to-Do Review. And the electrical water pageant became a very cheap way to entertain people every night and have an added value for staying at one of their hotels here. So, did you talk about the hurricane killing one of them?
Yeah. So, if you ever get to see it up close, it's amazing because it's literally a barge with some fence on it and some chicken wire and like C8 or C6 bulbs like tied down to it. It is, I mean, literally any of us could make this thing in our backyards today and it would be the same quality. They ran it pretty much exactly like it was for a really long time until I think the 2000s. There was a hurricane that came through, yeah, Charlie, and actually damaged the barges to the point where they needed to come up with new barges. But then they just went and put back the same chicken wire and light bulbs. But what was interesting that we found out when they actually started doing it, the way that the whole thing works is there's actually motors on the front and motors on the back that pull in a little bit of opposition to each other in order to keep it straight. Because otherwise, if there was just motors on the front, the back end of it would drift all over the place. And apparently the first time they did it, that was the problem. So they actually just had like an open brainstorming session. And I think it was just like some random guy, like a lifeguard or someone who said like, oh hey, you should have an engine on the back that pulls in the opposite direction so that way it stays taut. And they just threw a motor on it and it worked. I mean, God bless it. It's been 45 years, it's coming on 50, yeah, 47 years, and it just works. So, love that thing.
So, right ahead on our left, we have a series of slides we got in 1978 where there was a gigantic barge fire. And the slides are actually labeled Barge Fire with the date, because back then when you only had one theme park and something was happening on the water, you grabbed your camera and came out and took some Kodachrome slides of a gigantic barge fire. And the guy took it from the first little smoke to the giant inferno until it was finally just smoldering. Here comes some wake turbulence. But there you go. There's your free ride. Oh, there we go. Hands in the air. So I'm going to point out the Contemporary Resort Hotel because today is the actual anniversary. On this date in 1973, President Nixon was addressing the American Association of Newspaper Editors and taking their questions, and in response to one of their questions, he said, people deserve to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. And that is where all the presidents since this complex have been built have visited Walt Disney World at one time or another. But that may be the most famous. And that was done in the Ballroom of the Americas. The Ballroom of the Americas is still there on the second floor. And if nothing's happening in the Ballroom of the Americas and it happens to be unlocked, you can go in and stand in a spot and recreate it for yourself. Are we adding something?
Yes. So you guys are lucky. You're on the last tour. We have extra time.
It's been the best tour.
That's right. So we have a little extra time. We have to dock back at 3, so we're actually going to take a little detour up here, and we're going to go around the other island that we didn't get to do on the other tour. Shh, don't tell anybody. So we're gonna do we have any other Q&A before we do some trivia and some other stuff?
The monorail lost me.
Did we talk about the monorail lost beam? Talking to the captain, so come here. Yes.
So you can't see it right now behind there, but if you come to happy hour, we'll be happy to show it to you. On the other side, where the monorail exits the Contemporary from where we are, there are two beams that were not there when they finished the monorail loop. They left those two vacant because they had fallen off from a train en route from Washington State to Florida, and they fell into a snowbank, and so they had to wait until the snow melted to be able to dig them out. So rather than wait, they ordered two more beams cast. The beams were slightly different than all of the other concrete that was cast for years, so they installed them. And if you've listened to or visited these resorts with Tom Nabby, he tells you that you can tell the difference. You can feel just a slight little shudder when you hit them. We try and feel them and listen to them when we go through. We rode the monorail with Tom, and he told us, here's my theory. If you go out there before our happy hour and stand off to the side and watch the monorails hit it, you might not be able to see the monorail jiggle a little bit. If you go out after our happy hour and look, you might be able to see the monorail jiggle a little bit more. But that's where that is. We'll be happy to point out it's right by the corrugated wall, which is an original section of wall, the last surviving original section of Grand Canyon Concourse wall from 1971 that we can show you when we're up there. 4:30 to 6 at the outer rim in the Grand Canyon Concourse.
So, we have another story about a piece of cement beamway. So, obviously, after all the troubles with like the cement and losing it into the snowbank, when they built Space Mountain, they had to have giant pieces of concrete made as well to support the roof. And this was exposed to us from an Imagineer named Tom K. Morris. So rather than have the railroad problem, what they decided to do was ship these in by boat to Tampa and then put them on the back of a trailer and then drive them to Orlando. And he found a newspaper article where they were taking a turn getting ready to go either off of the interstate or by the interstate, and the cement beam for Space Mountain fell off and like was laid across the roadway there. So we don't have a good history with cement beams here apparently. All right, do we want to do the trivia? All right, let's do it. This is the time. All right, so we have a wonderful gift here. This is from the Magic Candle Company, Pirate Water Scent. Who doesn't want to smell that? Yeah. Fascinating. All right, so here is your trivia question. Yeah. All right, so show a hand. We're going to do hands up in order to answer. Don't yell it. Don't yell at the answer. What attraction met the chopping block so that Pirates of the Caribbean could be built? Oh. The Western River Expedition, yes.
Whose candle are they smelling? Oh, here we are.
All right, that was one of the saddest losses I think for Walt Disney World. Did anybody see the model of the Western River Expedition either at one of the D23 events or like in place on Main Street? Yeah, that was. And actually, somebody just did a great. Someone went and shot pictures of it. This is actually fascinating. And they've got some sort of program where it takes the photos and then puts it maps it onto a 3D model. And you can, what's that? Photogrammetry, okay, photogrammetry, that's the fancy, thank you. And you can actually get close and like look at this thing now online. It's fascinating. He did the same thing with the Star Wars land model. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. Anyways.
Off to your left, you see or to your right actually, is a recent addition to the Wilderness Lodge. If you wanted to experience the wilderness as John D. Rockefeller would have experienced it, that's where you would go. So you get the 1900s experience if you were a robber baron.
All right, so we have a few more things to do before we dock. We've got about 14 minutes left, which is great. We'll take it slow here. But what we're going to do real quick, Jason and the rest of the crew and myself, we're going to head to the back of the boat. We're going to go back there with the map. We're going to get a shot of the entire boat. So put your hands up and wave and yell and all that good stuff. And our helper from Disney, cast member here,
She's endured 3 tours. Give her a round.
Yeah. Everybody, when on the count of 3, say JT, because he's not here.
Everybody look forward, wave, hey! Boat number 3's the best! Yay!
All right, we're good. Thank you very much. All right. Yeah. Oh, well, our captain has something special for us.
So the architect, when he built the Wilderness Lodge, there's a hidden bear in there. It's more prominent at night when all the lights are on. If you look at the main building, the 2 triangles at the top, the windows, are the bear's eyes. The middle is the nose. And the 2 outreaching buildings are his arms.
No other tour got that. Now, remember, when there's other tours in the future, book the last one. Did you go on the last one? Yeah. It's a lot better than the first one, trust me. All right, any other questions, comments, and things you want to talk about? Questions you got for us about the tour, about anything Retro Disney, what we do? Is everybody excited about the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society? We really appreciate everybody's support coming out today, and like we said, anything we do with the T-shirts and everything with this we put on, it goes solely into keeping that historical aspect and keeping the nonprofit going. So we really appreciate everybody's efforts in that, helping us. We got years to go yet. There's a lot more we got planning and coming up. We're looking forward to putting another event on possibly later this year, later next year. There's not much left in this year. We only got a couple minutes left. Yeah, all my half money. But we do have one trivia question left. We're going to talk. But we're not going to let on to the answer because we're going to give that away. Oh, okay. Okay. So why don't you do it, and when we get an answer, I'll bring it up.
Okay, so you'll notice at the top of the Contemporary, when the Contemporary was built, it was the flagship resort for the Walt Disney World Resort. It was a flagship hotel, and it held that status until 1988 when they opened the Grand Floridian. As the flagship, it was the resort that they promoted the most. It was also the one that was built for convention business. They wanted businesses that come down here and civic organizations and hold conventions to fill their tower hotel. That's why it has the ballrooms on the 2nd level and had all the various nightlife and restaurants. They had a variety of different restaurants in there over the years, all along the concourse and down on the ground level. But at the top, along the lines of evening entertainment, the top of the world, how that, you're going to hear this theme from Mike Douglas too, how they handled the top of the world was every week they had a different, usually famous person in residence to entertain the guests and do nightly shows. And, at that time, you'd get Robert Goulet or Wayne Newton or somebody like that come in, and they would perform at least for a weekend. And then they also had a house band, which we've got footage of from the magical Walt Disney World. Remember that house band doing Proud Mary, right? Short of the World, right? Funky version. Anyway, so we have footage on our website that we got from a home movie of a famous performer doing, here's a hint, her routine up there to entertain the guests. Does anyone know who that performer is? Was it Sherry Lewis? That's the question. Does anybody know who Sherry Lewis was? All All right, so Shari Lewis did a show on television with a lamb puppet called Lamb Chop, and Shari Lewis is dead, but we do have Lamb Chop with us. And the famous song that Shari Lewis would close every show with her and Lamb Chop is, "This is the song that doesn't end. Yes, it goes on and on, my friend. Some people started singing it not knowing what it was, and they'll continue singing it no matter, just because this is the song that doesn't end." And you win Lamb Chop to take home with you. Now, if it was a 60-minute show, I don't know what she did for the other 58 minutes, but I know she sang that song.
All right, we're going to be pulling into the dock and disembarking. I want to thank everybody for coming out. Really appreciate this. I hope it. Yeah, we've got happy hour tonight. We're going to meet up at the Outer Rim Lounge tonight from 4:30 to 6. We have our free EPCOT walking tour tomorrow. Just meet outside the fountain at 11:30. Yeah, 11:30 at the fountain in front of Spaceship Earth, not the big one behind it, in the entrance where the prisms used to be. And thank you so much for coming out. We had a great time. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you've been on the previous Lake and Lagoon Tour, thank you for coming back out. We didn't take on any water like we did years ago, so it's a big improvement. I want a special round of applause and thank you to the Miles family for helping us out all these years and all of our everything that we've done. Art's back there on the camera, and thank you to the captains and our Jeff and Dan and Laura for helping us out as well. And with that, there's only one more thing left to do. I'm done, Hal's done, but Brian and Jason's done. Brian's gonna take us out.
Follow Todd McCartney and Retro Disney World on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at RetroWDW. Follow our host, Hal Bowers, on Twitter at GoAwayGreen and on the web at kingdomofmemories.com. Don't follow JT because he's not here. Follow our web designer and poster designer, Jason Bartel, at JasonDWS. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Brian P. Miles.
Thank you, everyone. You can get your poster up at the end. The Miles family is going to lead out.
Of course, I've got it okay.
It's coming back.
There's two posters today.
Thank you.
Two. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Double.
Two?
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Come on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is everybody coming from RetroWDW podcast and the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. Thanks to everybody coming out. We hope to see you soon at our next event.
It'll be great to get ashore again.
That's right. We got our landlubbers back.
Yep.
All right.
I got my sea legs.
Sea legs, that's it. I got our sea legs off. See you later.
Yeah, so it's like Zappo's, like old season.
Sorry,
Goes to 6 p.m.
Where am I signing?
We're somewhere in the green, and we'll just keep it in the same location every time.
Like the time. Okay. Number 6, and then p.m.
All right. Now it goes to Hal. We'll just go in. We'll just go in circles.
All right.
Yeah.
10 times.
This is not really the right spot for circles unless you're going to move that stuff.
Everything. So it's not just the shoes. No, it's like this. I got
Everybody having fun?
Hi.
You meeting a lot of people today?
Lots of new fans. Lots of old fans.
I heard they played it at the thing. They played the video, right?
Because the new Musketeers, the 77 version or whatever it was, sing that song. Yeah, they play the whole commercial.
Your version was better, I'll be honest with you. Your version was better than Musketeers. I don't want to be a modest.
I'm trying to like match faces to like I know. You probably know it.
Bring people down, put them on there, unload them.
Okay.
Thank you. You had a good time? I like it. You're one of the few people that have. Thank you. I like it because this is my favorite hotel.
Just to give you some orientation, because this is the traffic bottleneck, we're going to start here. We're going to talk about the fountain. We'll talk a little bit about Spaceship Earth without moving from here. Then we're going to look at gateway gifts. Then we're going to walk up to guest relations. Now, where we normally talk in guest relations, they had snaked the line through. So hopefully it has dissipated, and we'll all be able to have a little bit of a chat up there outside of the sun. But we'll see. So you'll remember behind me from 1982 until, when did the gravestones go in? 2000? Millennium, right? Millennium time. There were these beautiful 3 lucite spires here, designed by John Hench, Imagineer John Hench. They had plenty of time to put them in. They were installed 3 days before the park opened. Tom Nabby told us they were sunk into 12 feet of concrete. So they were about half as big below ground as they were above ground, which is not how we designed our little model fountain last year.
Who went to our event last year?
Who got one of our fountains last year at our EPCOT 35 event?
So when we designed that miniature fountain to give away, Jason here did all of the artwork and all the 3D dimensions.
Based on pictures, and it came out when we printed it, a big base and a tiny little spire, so we adjusted it for scale to make it look right. But the first thing I'll tell you about Spaceship Earth, you all know, is original opening day attraction.
Oh, yeah.
There was a big elevator at the bottom where they take everything up into Spaceship Earth and bring everything down out of Spaceship Earth. When they were building it, the bottom was left open. They were running out of time. They needed to get all the set pieces in. So they loaded all of the set pieces remaining into the elevator, took them all the way up to the top, put them around the moon up there, and closed up the bottom of the ride, and then moved the stuff around inside to finish it. So that's how they finished building Spaceship Earth. Last year we did a walking tour of Spaceship Earth track with D23, and that will show you the door inside on the other side of that mat. You can turn around and look. The mirrored base there. But what that is an elevator that takes you up to various floors in here. The key is the 4th floor, where we got off, and the bathroom is there. And a control panel for one of the cast members. And the bathroom they're not allowed to use because you can hear them flush the toilet when you're passing through the caveman scene. So they told the cast members you can't use that toilet anymore.
They also told us that it had the coldest water fountain in all of that pot.
And I verified that because I drank from it, and it is it must come right from the Frozen ride or something. It is the coldest water I've ever had, and it's awesome.
It's kind of like the holy water of Epcot. If you drank from that fountain, as we all did, you have longevity.
Should we cover a couple things we remember from the walking tour? You want to walk? I am tall and can see the crowd. It's going to be hard to assemble over there. Is all I'm saying.
I do want to say one thing that I actually noticed this morning on the drive-in.
On the drive.
So the Polybond things, we hear a ton of stuff about that on Spaceship Earth here. But I want you to take a second and look around at the building here and think about the entrance and the monorail platform. It's also the same stuff too. So that same material was used the ticket booth and everywhere, and it even goes as far back as this morning I noticed it was on the parking plaza where you go in. It's there too. So they actually maintain that design integrity from this point all the way back to the park to where you like come in to get your tickets to go park, which is pretty cool. We got one more URL.
You tell me what it is now.
All right, EPCOT. RetroWDW.com.
Okay, so if on your phones, mobile devices, etc., RetroWDW.com/EPCOT Tour. EPCOT Tour. 2 T's, right? EPCOT and Tour. All one word. You'll be able to follow along with photos of stuff we're going to reference. We have amped up this tour. The best free tour money can buy.
Learned a lot of things about Spaceship Earth. Next time you ride it, when you go to the top, after your time machine vehicle turns and you can see the Earth in the top of the sphere, and you start to go down, look off to your right. You'll see a pathway there. That was the original part of the ride that was going to go even further. There was going to be more scenes, and the bricks and the mounting points for the track are still there today.
Yeah, so the ride path was going to go higher. They were going to fill more of the top.
Yep.
There was also supposed to be a full-size mastodon. We did figure out it was mastodon, right?
Yep.
At the bottom with the caveman, but they cut that animatronic from the budget. Although they blamed it on weight, it was cut from the budget.
The other interesting thing about Spaceship Earth is each time machine vehicle, they can only remove from the building one at a time. There's a single gantry crane in there that can pick up one of the cars, move it to the elevator, get it down, and then have to start the process over.
And if they miss it by this much, they have to run the entire loop again.
All the way around.
That's the only way they can remove one of the cars.
So if you're complaining when this goes down for 2 years to be rehabbed, think about that is the only way in and out other than the exit.
So over here on the left, I'll tell you a little about World Key Information System. So back in 1982,
come on in if it's a little hard to hear. Let's come on in.
They debuted something here. Like, I'm looking at the crowd. Some of you remember this, but a lot of you are just taking all this for granted. So the very first touchscreen that almost any of us ever saw was debuted here in EPCOT Center. So everything that you're used to doing on your phone today is like happened here. And this was the first time we ever got to play with this. They had a system called World Key, and it had a touchscreen. Worked a little different from our touchscreens today. It didn't have like capacitance, but it shot light basically in a grid across the front of the TV, and then it would sense where you put your finger, and then it would realize, oh, that's where the button push happened. So let's go.
Electronic graph paper.
Yeah. So that was tied into a Laserdisc system, because Laserdiscs are fancy, or at least they were back in 1982.
They were the CD-ROMs of their day.
Yeah.
About that big.
And
12
and
looked like a record.
And a VAX computer that was all housed back here in Epcot Computer Central when it was Epcot Computer Central, and it would give you information about the park. So it'd say, oh, I want to learn about the universe of energy. So you'd hit the touch screen, and then it would start playing a little 2-minute video about the universe of energy, so you'd get an idea what it was. It was kind of like an interactive guidebook. But the other cool thing was that you could make live reservations for a restaurant. So you'd hit another button, and a person who was actually also housed in that building would come on screen, and they had a big honking camera on their desk.
In a cubicle.
Yeah, in a cubicle
with a camera pointed at
them. They had a monitor so they could see you because you had a camera pointed at you. And in fact, I think if you go over there, you can still see the hole where the camera would have been. And then you would actually talk to a person to make reservations. So before My Magic Plus and doing this on your phone, it's like you would physically do this with a person.
And you could make reservations the same day for 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
It was pretty easy.
So they were originally located in the post show of Spaceship Earth. But when that changed in like 1994, they moved them over here. So what you've got here is sort of the last vestiges of the World Key Information System. The only other place that I think still exists,
the DVC kiosk in World Showcase.
Well, that one's gone. No,
is that one going now?
That's gone. Yep. It is where the Agent P thing is, but there is a glass blowing kiosk in Germany.
Glas und Porcelain.
Yeah, and that was where the World Key Information System was out over in World Showcase. There was another one that he's talking about over where the Agent P sign up is.
Right.
There was a DVC thing. They actually finally demolished it and put up a new, more DVC-specific one. And there was another one located over towards the right-hand side as you're walking out into the World Showcase Plaza. That isn't there anymore because now the big shop is there. And there was also one located in the AT&T exhibit, since AT&T was one of the sponsors of it. Their technology is really what made World Key happen. And then you'll have to come in and take a look at this when you get a chance later on. But this little area right here that is now guest relations used to be the Univac display. So when you walk in the door here, Smart 1 would have been like 2 feet right in front of you, and the computer coaster and a lot of those early things.
Backstage Magic was in there.
If you look up on the left-hand side, there's kind of like this weird cone, like cylinder shape in the wall. that used to be the Univac, like the VIP, their like VIP area. So it's been turned into some other things now. And I was in there one day talking to a guy, and he told me that there were the animatronic figure of Mr. Eggs from the show was like right on the other side of the wall, and had been there, sitting there. For like decades, and finally someone took it out.
So there's two other interesting things. As Disney does a lot, they just board things up, right? They just leave it. And we always joke that, you know, there's somebody waiting on the other line. That computer's still on. She's sitting there waiting for your call. The other interesting thing is inside where Backstage Magic was in here, there was a giant model of EPCOT Center that was presented to you in a Pepper's Ghost fashion. It was actually above you in the audience. Right. The lights would come on, you'd see a reflection on the glass. We did speak to somebody and showed us pictures that about only 2.5, 3 years ago, it was still up there. Wow. It was still up there. No, it was additional.
No, it was
guy.
somebody else. He showed us when they put it in.
Yeah.
So it is.
But yeah, it's
Disney
still up there.
It's still. Now we have a lot of changes coming to this park very, very soon.
They're going to change the model and keep it in the ceiling.
Yeah. It's always been updated. It's always been updated. So maybe we should talk a little bit about. I can talk about Communicore before we move, since it's kind of quiet here. So talking a little bit about the way that Communicore is and the way it was designed. If you've listened to our Communicore episodes, Communicore was designed these two crescent shaped. You had Communicore East, and that's for Hal, because he always gets confused, and Communicore West. Now, we'll talk about a little bit later when we go over to West, some of the things that were in there. The neat thing about the way these buildings are built is there is a utilidor here. It does run kind of in a horseshoe shape around the two crescents, connects up back right here behind Universe of Energy is where the load was, and they could get in there and bring stuff around. The really interesting thing that I think is pretty cool about the buildings, they were designed to be not modular, but expandable. The back side, obviously that side and towards the land and the seas, they were designed so all they had to do was add an additional pillar and a roof, and they could push the buildings back and further. So the idea was that as Communicore and Interventions or whatever you want to call it, needed the space, they could grow. And I think only West there was a little bit of growth that they added down near Club Pool and everything like that. But that never came to fruition afterwards. They never expanded much out beyond that. But it still could be done today. So if you ever see some backside expansion going on, and again, half the stuff's empty, so I don't know what they're expanding into. But so really when you look around, it's very hard to see all the, as Hal pointed out, here's some more Alukaban coming down here, right here, tying into Spaceship Earth. The colors that they put on have really lost the architecture and kind of hide the way that this used to look.
It was very sleek.
Very sleek, very white, and in a Tomorrowland way almost, right? Yeah. Like over at the Magic Kingdom. So the other thing is we walk over towards where Centurium used to be. I want you to imagine this center area here in Communicore having ponds, because there were ponds and relaxing places to sit. There were 2 or 3 of them placed in the center there, and they didn't concrete that over into the early 2000s, somewhere in there. Those were really neat, and it gave a very interesting flow, and forced you to walk and meander a little bit more, and it was very relaxing. I remember feeding the ducks as a kid over there by where Starbucks is now, so it was really great.
That was Sunshine Terrace, right?
Sunshine Terrace, yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna head over that way, huh? You're right. We're gonna head over towards where
Centurium.
Well, it's Mouse Gear now.
Yes.
And then over towards Horizons and Universe of Energy. But as we go, take a look. Just take a peek back there where you'll see where the computer screens used to sit and you used to talk.
Get a picture later on, looking at the screen.
But it's very easy to spot as you walk by. You just kind of crane your neck.
Yep.
When we get over to where Electric Umbrella is now, right in front of that fountain, that was all part of the redo when they put these sails in to put the pin thing there around the Millennium. They covered over the little pond area, but the pond area used to sit, there was outdoor seating there at the Sunrise Terrace, which was supposed to go with the Sunrise Terrace there, which was breakfast, lunch, dinner. And when the park opened, it sold hearty Italian meals, which everyone wants in 102-degree weather. They want to go up and get a big old plate of lasagna and eat it on the terrace, the unair-conditioned outdoor terrace. But you could get breakfast pizza there. It's the first place a lot of people saw breakfast pizza. So we're going to go over that way. We're going to walk past. I don't know if there'll be a place for us to stop in the shade by the by Centurium / Mouse Gear.
We can stop in the
breezeway. Okay. but I don't recommend going inside Electric Umbrella because it smells like feet. But it is very cool. It's Raleigh Crump's last design work for Disney. So you can go and see the electric umbrella that's inside there, and just imagine it smelling new instead of smelling like it's an Acton commercial. Now we're going that way.
If it was 1982, we'd all be standing in 2 feet of water.
The little pebbles, kind of like is out over in front of Nemo.
Exactly.
Over there.
This retaining wall here, Jason's going to point out to it, that retaining wall. Yeah, it goes skying around this way, is the original wall for the pond. So if you were sitting at the electric umbrella, you would look down into the water right here. And it kind of sculpted out around here. Wasn't very big. There was another one, as I talked about, over there. You see all those planters?
There was no pin trading thing there.
On the website, yeah. Somebody's sitting about here and taking a shot across the water.
Yeah, so you're looking that way.
Photos on your app.
Yep.
Looking out from here.
Right here.
And then the other one was down by my mouse gear outside of that. We'll point that out when we get down there a little bit later. So you can now say that you stood where the pond was.
Right.
This is the original wall that the pond went up against.
So I was talking about Communicore earlier. Now, one of the really neat things, design aspects of Communicore when it was open, and that I think Hal and I have an affection for, when you walked into any of these buildings, all of the sets and different things you would go do were sunken by about 2, 3, even 4 feet. And it gave a very intimate setting to it, where you would have to walk down a ramp or a set of stairs. And that was at every single one of these locations. I think the only thing that might be left that's that way, you go to Club Pool, that's where Expo Robotics is. That's why you go down. That was sunken in from the rest of Communicore and the rest of the area here. So that's something that I really miss. But I'm going to let Hal talk about it, because he spent countless hours in what is now Mouse Gear playing an Atari 5200.
Yeah, so Mouse Gear today is just a single level, but back when this was the Centaurium, which was a play on words because it was like the Emporium at the Magic Kingdom, but for Epcot Center. So it was the Centaurium. It was actually configured a lot like a department store. So there was a second floor that you would take, there were stairs right at the entrance, these big sort of wooden and metal, very 1980s, sort of sharp ribbage looking things.
And the first floor was sunken too.
Yeah, the first floor was sunken too. You would ascend to the top floor for jewelry and electronics. So they sold Ataris. They had an Atari 2600 and an Atari 5200, which was pretty much new at the time. So in the afternoons, I would actually go up there and play Atari 5200, and they would just let you play for as long as you wanted, which was really nice. But the downstairs, it had like an incredible assortment of merchandise. It's like
souvenir coins, and plush toys,
tie pins, shirts. Not as many T-shirts and things as we have today. Some, but polo shirts and like much classier merchandise, records, cassettes, and all kinds of things. But it was a wonderful store. It was very cool.
It's classy.
Yeah, very classy.
Go on the site. Go to if you pull up your phones, we got a number of pictures of Centaurium on there. And what's really one of the things that people really remember is the name plate, the store name, because it had these hexagons, and in each hexagon was the original Epcot symbol for all the different pavilions around here. So it kind of lured you in that, it's got Universe of Energy and Horizons. You could get all your merchandise from all those different attractions. Because when you exited Horizons and we exited Universe of Energy, you didn't go into a gift shop. You came here to shop, right? There was very few of coming out and buying something back then. It was more of a central location. As we're standing here too, notice the pillars. So remember I talked about how this could expand it outward? Kind of look there at the mouse gear here, right? You can see how there's an outside pillar and inside pillar. And again, the idea was to just add another pillar and keep pushing it out as needed. I don't remember if that's one of the expansions. Do you know if that's original? That bump out there is it? I think that might have. Oh, you know what? That was a breezeway. You used to be able to walk behind Centaurium. There were doors there, and you'd walk through, much like this was a breezeway. So we're on the other side of the breezeway. That would walk and curve around, and following this curve right here is where the utilidors. They're under us, right in this general area, so they can bring the merchandise out.
here back in 1984.
Anybody want to guess for a pin what was here in 1984?
It's my NPR voice. The what? No, it wasn't the luggage sorting game.
It's a big machine that had a countdown of how many people were in the Earth.
Close. It was a little bit over there, but there's something else going on here that ties into that.
Ties into the attraction next door.
Energy what? Energy exchange. So we got a pin. There was a giant piece of oil shell here. You know the oil shell joke? There you go. Start throwing these out to the crowd. So yeah, this was the Exxon Energy Exchange. When you exited Universe of Energy, they would direct you over here. They didn't have space in their pavilion, but they did rent out this whole area here.
So this was like the post show, basically, for Universe of Energy.
Giant oil rigs, big piece of oil shell. There was different touch screen games to play.
Dinosaur soup.
Dinosaur soup. All sorts of stuff was here, and that lasted until the first incarnation of the whatever that became, Energy something or other afterwards. Ellen's. But it was a really neat place. Again, just like all of these things in Communicore, kiosks, touchscreens, things you had never ever seen before. What's some of the other things in Energy Exchange? The coloring book.
Oh yeah, and there was a touchscreen game where you had to make a NFL quarterback be able to, or maybe it was college, go from his hotel to the stadium on time, and you take your finger and kind of like try to drag.
Oh, we have some good video of people playing those games. Yeah.
Watching people use touchscreen when they didn't know what it was, or the best is people doing this. Just poking at it, trying to get the touch space. Yeah.
So, where we are, if you look up to where those exit signs are against that back wall, where the Sum of All Thrills was, that was actually the entrance and exit to the computer or studio review, and they reused that second floor to get you onto the Sum of All Thrills. So that EPCOT model that we are talking about is right up in that roof somewhere.
So what he said is the studio computer review was up there, where the Sum of All Thrills is, and that EPCOT model we were talking about that was part of the backstage magic is somewhere up there above us.
Yeah, don't throw the ice.
Where they ran like all of the audio animatronics and all of the shows when everything was centralized before computer technology made it so that it could be decentralized. If you look up a movie called Daryl,
D-A-R-Y-L.
That was
period.
Shot in 1984. It's like they actually filmed some of the computer scenes inside of there because it looked really cool. But the reason that everything was centralized at the time is they were just starting to move from like really super old equipment into new equipment. The main computers used these huge disks, like stacks of platters of hard drives, about yay tall, about this, and they would basically, there was a handle on the top, you would take it, you would put it down in the machine and turn it and keep it in place. And those machines were so finicky, it actually made more sense to have them all in one location, so if something broke, a technician could come and like fix the machines there. So all the audio, everything that ran all the audio for the rides, everything that ran the programming for the rides was all located in this place.
And the bin loops too.
Yeah, all the bin loops for the sound that ran throughout the whole park, all in one place. Now time has gone on, things have changed. It's like now it's everything's running off of ROM chips and all that programming and even the audio stuff because we all have digital players. It's all digital. So over the years, as they build new rides, all that stuff is moved and centralized around the ride itself, and it's much more reliable than it ever was. So this started out as a huge complex, and then it got smaller and smaller and smaller over the years. And I think it's probably just mostly offices now today inside, and not so much computer stuff anymore.
Think about the problem that EPCOT had with Communicore, right? Back then, as we were talking about touchscreen, we constantly bring it up. What we carry in our pockets today, right? Everything that you were doing in there, everything that you could possibly do, you can do it all right here. So you have a social issue here. How can you present something that's exciting and new when you've got so much exciting and new every step of your day? So you see Colortopia and they're reaching out to other things because you just can't bring that technology is so different. And plus we have a lot of IP coming in as well. So
we should talk about Universe of Energy while we're still in the shade, and then we can just look at it as we walk by it.
No tears, it's okay.
Yeah. No. So they're fine. They're removing the solar panels, which are, I think, 35-year-old solar panels.
Yeah.
So they make much more efficient stuff now. But one of the keys of that ride, being an energy-based ride, was that you were riding on sunshine because a portion of the ride vehicle power
came from the solar panels on the roof. Modern solar panels you could probably power a lot more than just the ride vehicles with. So
like a roller coaster going into a big building.
You could, traveling through time.
That's right.
With a talking, what's that thing, a raccoon or?
Yeah, I forget.
Yeah, so it'll be great, I'm sure, but you know, Ellen is out of work. Bill Nye is learning new things. And what happened before that?
Well, one of the really neat parts of this attraction that a lot of people didn't know was the turntables. They were huge, massive concrete turntables that had to be precisely balanced. I forget all the details, so I invite you to go listen to our Universe of Energy episode where we talk about how they were balanced, and there was special polishing that had to go on, and they had problems with bearings, I think, and all sorts of issues.
Yes.
But the engineering that went into that and the concrete pour at the time was pretty amazing.
And particularly at the time, the whole moving theater concept was totally new.
Right.
So probably the first time any of us went and sat down, we were like, oh, they're going to show a movie.
And how many tons were those ride vehicles?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Pretty massive.
they told us in the ride, especially back then, but the whole idea of sitting in church pews and then all of a sudden the entire church
you'd be sitting
moving.
there, then it would all of a sudden you'd hear this psh, and the thing started to shift, and the audience audibly gasped because it was so new and different.
And there were air bearings actually too. They would blow air to help turn it and so that there wasn't any friction. It was pretty amazing.
The other thing we should mention is the pre-show, which Hal loves with the
radar screens.
The radar screens,
yeah,
and
cool.
That what's that?
It's on the screen.
Yeah, that's right. They were triangular in shape, so they would turn, and they could be set up to where they could be. So there was white on one side and black on two sides. So as the show progressed, you could turn them to show either halves or wholes. And there were, if you watch some of the videos, it's very neat because sometimes they'll do a wipe from one sided screen to the other, and they'll flip the screens in concert with it. It was very cool. The guy who did it was Hungarian?
Radar?
Yeah, and it's interesting. He comes from a theater family. His dad also did like very innovative stuff in the 1920s. He and his brother worked on these kinds of things. He had done some World's Fair shows in the 1960s, which is how I think it came to Disney's attention, because they also had a competing theater show at the same time. So I think when they went to do EPCOT, they said, we need to find some people that know how to do some interesting things, and someone remembered the World's Fair show. In fact, I invite you all to go look at Expo 67 that happened in Canada, because there was a hell of a lot of Epcot Center in Expo 67, including geodesic spheres and a building that looks much like Journey into Imagination. So it's fascinating. I think there was a lot borrowed there.
Yeah, and for Universe of Energy fans, take a listen to our Universe of Energy episode if you haven't already. There's some great stories about the theaters bumping into dinosaurs too, so when they were trying to tune it. So some good stuff. All right, so we have a possible maybe here. We can't confirm it, but Jason's been doing some research, and we think we might have one of the long-lost Horizons light poles that's still here. And Jason's going to tell you where the old concrete to the new concrete, and how you point out the Horizons planter that's left of it. I don't know if we're going to talk about wonders of life. There's not much wonder left. But we can walk by it and point it out. All right, we're going to compete with the diameters there, whatever they're doing. So Wonders of Life was originally presented by MetLife. Does anybody remember the DNA sign that was out there, right? So there were a couple attractions in there. Cranium Command was the big one, and Buzzy is still in there potentially. There's pictures of Buzzy still kind of hanging out, droopy. The other big one was Body Wars, which was based on the same type of technology that Star Tours used, where you would venture inside the human body. That one was a little queasy because it was kind of liquidy. You know, you would kind of, when you weren't moving in space, they kind of just hung you out and bumped you. But you were in the bloodstream, kind of.
Yeah.
Did you get a little queasy?
In particular, there was one move that went on a diagonal like this that was notorious for making people sick. Which they did not have that in Star Tours. So that was unique to that one.
Right.
That was the puker.
Yep. There were a variety of other health-related items in there too. There were bikes that you could cycle, and the faster you pedaled, the faster the screen would move, similar to some of the spinning bikes that you can buy now. The Making of Me was kind of a revolutionary film for its time, and also breaking that you could learn about reproduction here at Disney. And there was many warnings outside saying, hey, We're telling it like it is in a way, in a Disney fashion, and that kind of ruffled some feathers, but that was in there as well.
Well, it was interesting because they actually had some unique film that they built the show around. There was some actually in uterus photography of a baby, which they licensed. It was the first time anybody had ever done that.
Yeah.
And then they figured out how to build a show around that footage because it was so groundbreaking.
Right.
And that's one of the other things that I always like to talk about. There was so much groundbreaking stuff going on from a research perspective that you got to see here. In the Living Seas, they were working with guys that were finding the Titanic. In order to put that to every one of these pavilions, not only did you have the corporate sponsors, but you had top scientists working hand in hand with Disney Imagineers to come up with the stories that would be told. So when they're doing the land, you know, Raleigh Crump is working with this professor from the university, from the University of Phoenix to come up with, like, not University of Phoenix, it was Arizona, to come up with, you know, what kind of story should we tell? And hey, hydroponics, that's new. Let's showcase that. So that was really the neat thing, and I think the reason that EPCOT worked then and maybe not as much now, besides money, the corporate sponsors also opened up the doors to their R&D labs. So the Imagineers got to go in and see what new technology they were working on. Horizons used brand new GE video technology. Not so much Living Seas, but like in Imagination, there was a part where you came through and it took your picture and displayed it on a screen. That was the first video still store that had been out in public for anybody to see. That was straight out of their R&D labs. It took up an entire room in order to do that.
Went under the water in a monorail.
No, that's true. The hydrolators were new technology.
That was new. So they recently have painted Wonders of Life. People thought that I thought maybe they would use this for the new space restaurant that's coming, because I thought it would be great to project on the dome. Alas, I'm not an engineer, an Imagineer. So it's obviously been used many times.
You mentioned a few other things in there.
Yeah.
The Goofy's Health Fair, which were all the little exhibits that you could touch, hot and cold together, and you could touch the one piece of metal and the other piece of metal and they felt fine. If you touch them together, all of a sudden one was getting hot, one was getting cold.
Yeah.
My favorite, stick your finger in here and tell me what you feel. The bike that you had to make the light go on, and there was all kinds of little exhibits out there based around health. Probably the first health food stand was in there. You could buy fruit and salads and kale and things like that back in the day.
And previous to this opening, the only health-related thing was actually Kitchen Cabaret, where they were singing about the food
nutrition,
groups and nutrition. So now you had moved and expanded out that concept. And as we talked about on that episode, Hal pointed out how that had to change when Food Rocks came in, because it wasn't it became the pyramid. And
so
Peter Gabriel.
Health Pavilion was one of the original EPCOT. It was on the plans all along from the beginning. They always planned to do a health and life one. MetLife eventually sponsored it. It was a life insurance company. They did not have a booth to sell you life insurance when you came out. But one last note before we move on, the DNA sign he's talking about, the arch that was there that said Wonders of Life, is now over the entrance plaza at Magic Kingdom. So when you pull in to the parking plaza, that arch that says Magic Kingdom with the letters spelled out, that is the original arch from Wonders of Life. They moved it over there when they redid it. So
last part before we move on to, we can't confirm this. This is our little Horizons thing here. My wife and I went looking for this 2 days ago, but this pole here, we cannot confirm it or not, but when Horizons was there, part of its feature was being lit up at night, and there were poles in different areas. This might be, I'm not going to say it is, but it might be. It's in the approximate location where it should be. It's obviously being used for something else now. But
one on the south, one on the north, and then two in the center planter. Two in the center planter lit up the front plane, and then each side lit up the side planes. Because it was flat and then side, and then it went back.
So we're going to take you now to the planter that is still in the original Horizon shape. It wasn't where the sign was located, but it's the only. You'll notice everything over here is very angular, right? This is the hard science, and over there everything is the soft science and is very rounded and curved. The way that this is designed, if you go back into the early aerial photography, you'll see that the planters from an overhead view were meant to complement how these buildings were set up. And you can see the edge right here that we're standing on here has a very straight line that lines up with the front of the building. And you're going to see the same thing over here. And if you could fly up 30 feet and look down like a drone, you'd see the shape of Horizons and the planter that we're going to go over to.
Yeah, so in that tour page that we sent you the link to, this planter over here on the right is what we're talking about, and there's some overhead shots of it.
So, as Todd was talking about, this area, this set of concrete and all the planters and the sitting areas over here were original for EPCOT and designed to sort of mirror and match the look of Horizons. And in fact, this little planter right here, it's funny, when they tore, so the building actually would have been, yeah. So if we're...
About where the sign is.
Yeah, so if we're here... Where the mission space sign is about where the planter started that had the Horizons sign on it. So they basically drew a line straight across here, and everything... and everything on the far side got switched to mission space, and everything on this side stayed exactly the same. So you can see in the pictures how like this big planter would have led into the other little planter that was the entrance to the Horizons, and the building basically would have started
Where the ball is, one of the plants.
Yeah.
And Horizons was up a little bit. It was raised probably about 10-15 feet higher than we are now. So when you were walking from here, imagine coming through the breezeway where we were, and you could see how this opens up and invites you to go into the building, and you got to walk around the planter, and then you would kind of walk up a very, very low ramp, if you will, up to the entrance to the building. The building was massive. It housed two Omnimax, right? 2 Omnimax theaters, and your traveling time vehicles. I mean, we could sit here all day. I know you guys all want a Horizons episode. It's coming. Don't worry. We'll get there. But it's really one of the. Everybody loved that ride, and we'll talk about it more in depth when we do that.
We should cover World of Motion now because you won't be able to hear it over the
right. So we won't even go over to test track because it's going to be definitely too loud.
So the route we're going to take, we'll talk a little bit about World of Motion before we go, but the route we're going to take is by original EPCOT bathrooms. So if anybody needs a pit stop, now's the time, and then we'll assemble along the walkway behind them. So you'll be able to find us.
So who wrote the original World of Motion?
Wow,
all right, nice. That is awesome. So this was one of my favorite rides. It took you through the history of transportation. We did a great 2-part episode on it. We're not very exhaustive, very detailed. But there was something like 120 audiometronics in there. Massive. It was an Omnimover ride, just like many of the other rides here. One of the cool features that I always loved is that after you boarded your vehicle, you actually came outside and you had a fantastic view.
An open vista as they took you from the first level up to the second to start the ride. They progressively took you downward. But we get a lot of slides, a lot of people's pictures, because you'd be in your ride vehicle, all of a sudden you come up to this open air covered, but open air, and get a direct shot of Spaceship Earth going as you go up the level. And so everybody took that picture when they rode World of Motion.
And the reason you go upstairs today in test track, if you remember after you do your seatbelt check, you go up, and that's because the way that building was designed, the original ride was on the 2nd floor, and the Trans Center was down below, just as it is today.
Right,
so that's why test track.
Future vehicles, future vehicle technologies, all that stuff was on the ground level.
Yep, monorail technology, maglev,
Bird and Robot.
Right. Sponsored by General Motors. And then when they redid the ride, they changed the sponsorship to Chevrolet because they wanted to project an American car brand rather than an American car maker with many brands. Right. So they wanted to focus on one brand. Does it make you want to buy a Chevrolet?
Come with me in there, Bill.
He's got the card that moves sideways.
Give me the name of any Imagineer that you know of that did some design work on World of Motion. Mort Kimball. John Hench? I don't. Well, you're going to get one.
I'm just talking stuff.
There you go.
Mark. Davis.
Thank you. Yes, there you go. So what's interesting about that?
Just put this for you, I guess.
it was, and there's one more person who's like sort of kind of important who did the background sets and thing. There's your hint.
Oh, Claude Coates?
Yeah, Claude Coates.
Where's Claude? Where's Claude? Who gets it? Back there?
And who we say did the land and the electric umbrella?
Raleigh Crump.
All right, somebody gets it. There we are. Back there.
So what's interesting about World of Motion, it was done in a very piecemeal fashion from what we can find out. We know that Mark Davis did a lot of drawings and concepts for stuff that ended up inside based on illustrations that we've seen. But for some reason, he got, as usually happens with Mark Davis, at some point along the way, he got pissed off at Disney and left. So Ward Kimball, having a big background in trains and other transportation stuff, they kind of brought him in to ride herd a little bit on it. And he did an awful lot of design work on it too. But it was like Haunted Mansion, this ride was sort of a combination of a lot of Imagineers' work. Claude Coates, of course, did a lot of the background stuff because Mark was more of the gag guy. But we found out from Tom K. Morris, who's also an Imagineer, who had worked quite a bit on Journey into Imagination, when he was in the draftman's department. Does anybody remember the scene with the like the different chariots? So there was like the Chinese. Okay, so they got to the point where they were getting ready to do plans to build stuff out, and they realized like no one had designed any of the temples that were behind them. So there was like a Greek temple in front of the Greek one, and like a Chinese pagoda behind. Nobody had done that, so he just did it, and they were like, "Great, that's perfect," and off they went. So. There were times during the production of that ride where they were just literally asking just about anybody they could to try to solve some of the problems. In particular, the one that I remember was the balloon scene. You remember, it's like the balloon's got like the guy and the pig and the chickens.
Always
they're in between the two buildings. Like literally, like many people were trying to come up with ideas of what to do with that balloon scene until they finally settled on the one that they got. So it's interesting. It's a real mishmash of different concepts. So there wasn't just one person who's responsible for that.
Satellite dishes.
Oh yeah, satellite dishes. So that would have been right over...
Right around in this greeny... Yeah, this has changed a bit.
Right here.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll talk about...
So
there's pictures of them in the...
Yeah. Oh, perfect.
Gallery.
Pictures of the satellite dishes.
So back in 1982, when they opened up the Future Choice Theater, which was... here's the thing. Here's an idea. What if we used an electronic means to like poll people and ask them questions about what they thought? Again, something we take for granted every day, but this is kind of the first opportunity that that a company had to do that. So initially they tried to hook up with Time magazine to sponsor this poll. They would come in and basically you'd sit down in this half-round theater and a guy would ask you questions about what do you think about I'm trying to think of
energy of tomorrow. What will we be using the most? Energy tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is one. They related a lot to the pavilions. And
yeah. One of the funny ones is like if you could sell off any state to like pay the U.S. debt.
That's right.
Which state would you sell?
Yep.
And I think the number one answer was New Jersey.
It was New York.
New York.
New Jersey was a close second, and California was in there.
All right.
They're just getting rid of the coast.
So as the pre-show to that, out front, they had a series of sort of like kiosks that you could walk around and look at. And they had this very novel thing at the time called satellite television. So again, this is 1982. We don't have cable everywhere yet. It's like we pretty much all have just regular old antennas like on our houses. But they had several like big, giant like communications dishes out here. One of them would pull in satellite feeds, so you could actually go in and like choose to watch some news from like New York or Chicago or any of the stations that were already on satellite. It was also a broadcast facility too, so they could uplink if they shot video here at EPCOT, which they did sometimes with like EPCOT magazine and some other shows that were going on at the time. They could actually upload the video to the satellite as well to broadcast it. So for years and years, these big white satellite dishes sat out over here. You could see them from inside. Back before this was covered with bamboo and trees and plants and even just like coverings, like one of the neat things about the old Communicore is like all of these windows were open. Like it was all very natural light, very light and breezy inside, not dark like it is today. So yeah. Now it's a nice place to.
While we're passing, which door is is the imagination door for them to go in and look at? Now that we're on this side of Mouse Gear, did I miss it?
It's in there.
Or is it that door?
I have a quick story that we'll.
Is that the door where the dream?
I think
that's right. So
I have a quick story. Charlie is with us today. He worked on maintenance. Say hello to Charlie.
Charlie, thanks for keeping everything running.
Yep. So he worked on maintenance here in the 80s on the late night shift. And he told a story, and I hope I get this right, so feel free to interject, but it's a funny story. He was working around this general area, I believe, at night, and all of a sudden a car came through. And there was a woman, and he doesn't know how she got here, who was looking, I believe, to go to Orlando. And somehow in the middle of the night, drove into Future World with her car looking for directions. So it's there you go. That's him. He told us right from the horse's mouth. He told me another great story. We're going to talk about the news ticker that was hooked up to the satellite dishes down on the end of Communicore East here. And Charlie would do maintenance on that, and every now and then the bulbs would burn out. And these were original electric bulbs, nothing LED.
So at the time, it was like a Times Square sign, traveling sign.
Exactly.
With light bulbs, not LED lights out.
Exactly.
And they'd burn out real quick. So to change these bulbs was a pain in the ever-loving feathers. I tell you, really bad. And one of the guys thought up, he worked in cinema at the time, these Erasm bulbs. They had long tubes bust like this, like that. So we'd stick it, the tape around the front, stick it in, turn the bulb out, pull it out, and put a new one in.
That was the only way to do it.
It saved like hours of work.
Because nobody had designed a way to do this stuff. The other one I remember you telling me about was the Fountain of Information in AT&T, which was the records and all that information. And I believe you said that there was no way you could get up to the top. They never designed a way. It was like
shaped like a cake.
Right.
The smallest one was
and you had like lean ladders on top of the display.
Inside, stepping on cables.
Yeah.
God knows what else.
So similar to other things done, a lot of things were done quickly here to get them up and running. And but
I'll tell you one, this is not this area, it's UK.
Yep.
Right? We used to have to work on the outside, the speaker system on the outside in the gazebo.
Yep.
And after I retired, I used to go for coffee. I'd go for coffee in Winter Park, and I'm sitting there and I got talking about UK Pavilion. And sitting with us was the guy who designed the thing. Right? So I'm talking about, he's talking about, I asked him, did you design the gazebo in the back? He said, yeah. And I used to have to crawl under that damn thing. Right? There was no way to do it. And there was bugs and dirt and spiders. I'm telling you, like, I said, I'm ready to kill you. That's a true story.
There we go. So thank you, Charlie, for sharing those with us. It's awesome. We've used them on the tour before, and we've got Charlie with us today. So thank you much. All right. All right, so we're going to point out, we're going to move along. Brian's got one thing,
We're going to move over to the other side. So we'll get on the walkway and move over to the other side, find a stopping point to look at the other side of the building. But as you pass, at this entrance to Mousebeard, if you've never seen it, pop inside, straight ahead up top on your right is one of the original Dreamcatcher mobiles that the Dreamfinder rode in the turntable scene at the beginning of Journey into Imagination. So it's just up there along with all the other artifacts and stuff.
It's been stripped down. It's not complete like it was. It's kind of become an abstract version of itself.
But it's obvious what it is.
Yeah, but the parts are definitely from that, because when they took out Journey, they sold off one to a collector, and then the other ones were actually just broken up and sent out for use for display. At all kinds of, so one of them went over to like what's the
World of Disney.
No, the other
sounds like
the,
2 words.
The Overflow store where they sell the
property control.
No.
We get it. Mouse Surplus used to be the
Character Warehouse.
Yeah, right.
So some of the pieces went out to Character Warehouse.
Oh, for design, for decoration.
to just use as decoration.
They didn't sell it. Right.
Yeah, they didn't sell. They just kept it internally, and that's how the one ended up there.
To catch the dreams of people looking
and the other
for a
one's
bargain.
just scattered out to the
You
winds.
mentioned where the dragon went from World of Motion, right? The big dragon. If you remember that scene from World of Motion,
So
that
that's
one's
in Paris.
Yeah.
On the backstage tour, along with the Horizons vehicle, the Pegasus.
The model, that they used in the one Horizons.
Pegasus hoverlift.
Yeah, so that's on the Backlot Studio
and the
tour in
sub.
Paris.
Right.
Until they redo that part.
Yep.
So.
And the sub from.
All right. So on your own time, when you're done, if you want to hop into Mouse Gear, take a look at Dreamfinder's Dreamcatcher, and we'll continue on.
But wait, we've been alerted. There's the joyful whatever's doing the stage show at Fountain of Nations, so nobody will be able to hear us over there.
All right.
We can't out-scream gospel music.
Well, why don't we do this? Let's talk a little bit about the seas and land.
Well, we can get over to that side, but
do we want to try to walk?
Yeah, that's fine. As long as you got nothing else to talk about over here.
So Plunge Pool, that was where Expo Robotics was. If anybody.
Flamingos were by the Odyssey.
Yeah,
so you want to walk over that way?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to tell a real quick story. If you listen to our podcast, we interviewed a former co-worker of mine who actually during the college program for years, he spent the time at the Odyssey. And his job one day, and most days, they sent him in there. The Odyssey was a hamburger, hot dog, French fry type place. We'll talk a little bit about the construction. But the funny story about this is that they sent him in there and they said, okay, you're going to slice tomatoes. He says, I'm going to slice tomatoes. Give me a knife and I'll cut tomatoes, and when I'm done, I'll do something else. So they said, no, you're going to slice them on this industrial slicer. And it's basically this device where you drop a tomato in and push it through, and it just comes out
split into, however many pieces and slices. So he says, all right, he sees the tray, he does the tray, and he gets them done. He's like, all right, what else do you need? Tomatoes. So he says that tray. Tomatoes.
Thousands
all
and thousands
he did
of tomatoes
in his program. Sat here at the Odyssey, just slicing tomatoes. He enjoyed his time down here. He loved working here and said it was great, except that's all he did. What was it, the Broilmator 2000?
The Broil Master 6000.
The Broil Master 6000 is what they used here, where basically you'd put raw meat in one end, a hamburger patty would come out at the other. Basically, you put your frozen patties in.
No,
so
we have to do that.
No, go ahead.
So the cast cafeteria is attached to, uses the same kitchen as the Odyssey. So that's where he was serving two masters doing that. He also told us that this is where he sliced handwich rolls. Slicing the top off, scooping the inside so that the land pavilion could sell their handwiches.
Who doesn't know what a handwich is? Do we all know what handwiches
know
are?
what a handwich is? Oh, I love this crowd.
You didn't know how? Okay, yeah.
Well, he is also the person who gave us a critical piece of information. We knew there were handwiches here in the land pavilion at the farm market, and we knew there were handwiches that were sold in Tomorrowland at the lunching pad in the Magic Kingdom. But we did not know that they sold handwiches when they opened the Disney MGM studios until he told us that he worked over there at the opening, and they were slicing the rolls there and selling them stuffed with Cobb salad. There were Cobb salad handwiches at the Disney MGM studios.
Right now would be great to
Isn't
have
that a great idea? Like, I want them to bring those back. Not those bread cones they sell now, like an actual hoagie roll cut off and scooped out. Yummy way to eat a salad. Plenty of bread.
So this restaurant was actually never supposed to be here.
Right.
Originally, this was supposed to be a large restaurant. Was it attached over by the seaside?
I think so.
Yeah, it would have been over by the seaside. But when they started to do, again, soil testing here, like the sinkhole problem tends to be a big problem here at Epcot. In fact, the whole configuration of the lagoon here, originally it was going to be much tighter. They realized once they started to put pilings in, they had to push everything back and make it a lot wider. So they ended up having to reconfigure a lot of things at the last minute. When they did the soil test to put in the large restaurant, they discovered they couldn't do it. And so I think that's when they decided to combine forces. They knew they needed a cast cafeteria that was sort of off-site, and then I think they just piled this onto here.
Yep.
And one of the interesting things that I found out is, like, this building was actually not designed by WDI or WED at the time. It was actually subcontracted out to another architectural firm who worked on it.
Which makes sense why it doesn't really match.
So yeah, if you notice, it kind of doesn't match the rest of Epcot. That's why. A lot of things at the last minute, just they ran out of resources that went to do things. In fact, the whole post-show of World of Motion was done by a former Imagineer, a guy that they fired, like Marty Sklar fired and said, okay, now start your own company, because we can't do this, but I'm going to recommend you to GM to do this. So he started a company called BRC Imagination Arts, and now they still work for GM and do all kinds of great stuff. But no, I'm trying to remember.
We keep forgetting his name.
Bob Rogers.
That's it.
So another really interesting thing about Epcot is we are 300 yards this way from the original plan. We were supposed to be, if we were standing in the park, it would have been over that way. And the reason was an endangered woodpecker up in the woods that they found when they were doing their initial planning. And they could not take the trees down, and they had to be saved. And in fact, if you look on Google Maps, one of the roads right out by Epcot is called Woodpecker Way or Woodpecker Street or something like that. And we are actually shifted over 300 yards from where they originally wanted Epcot to be. I believe now all the woodpeckers that were endangered were actually relocated on their own or something, and they're not even there anymore.
Yeah, they left before construction started.
There's rumor of picking up the whole park and moving it 300 yards this way, but I don't know if they're going to do
It's part of the redesign.
That's right.
The last thing I'll mention is, if you follow me on Twitter, I occasionally will remind people that flamingos used to reside here at Epcot. They used to reside in that body of water behind you and along that bank there. And this water used to be significantly clearer than it is now, less brackish. So it had the same kind of look that the water over out in front of the Living Seas has. Low water with clear with some stones on the bottom. But those flamingos originally resided in the Magic Kingdom. Then they moved to Discovery Island. Then when they opened Epcot Center, they brought them over here. And then when Animal Kingdom, they relocated them from here over to the Safari and Animal Kingdom, where somebody once asked me, well, how long do flamingos live? Are any of those flamingos still the Epcot flamingos? They are, because the flamingos live about 25 to 30 years. So there is a likely chance that a few of the survivors at Animal Kingdom have lived at least at Epcot Center. But at one time, there was probably flamingos that lived in 4 different spots on Disney properties.
Can you tell us they put the bad ones here? Wasn't that the, like...
No, that's Australia. It's a penal colony.
So I think what we're going to do is we're going to walk over to Imagination just outside. We'll talk a little bit about the backwards fountain and a couple of the other things over there. All right, so we have the backwards water fountain over here to the left. You're right. I want to talk a little bit about the pyramid up at the top. Notice it does not have any plexiglass, does not have anything on it at all. Does anybody remember seeing the original fountain that was there? Did not? You do? Yeah. Saw it. So it did not last very long. It was a similar shape and similar design. It was more like hexagons covered with plexiglass and triangles.
It got very discolored very
quickly, and the Florida sun turned a nasty shade of yellow. You could not see through it anymore. It became very translucent and almost opaque at some point. And that was eventually ripped out pretty soon after the park opened, replaced by the erector set that you see here today. So that fountain is supposed to represent your imagination, that the water is flowing up. Most people don't know that. And if you keep track of recent events, somebody did try to bathe in here and walk through a couple of years ago, I believe. So I like this area as a kid. Remember we said in the beginning that the hard science was over there, right? This is the soft science, if you will. Look at the architecture difference like behind you in the ponds, how everything is curved. When we were over at Horizons, where everything was at like 45-degree angles, 90-degree angles, and everything here is very soft for the soft sciences. Do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, so
I was got great.
One of the questions that always plagued me is like, what's up with the pyramids? Why are there pyramids here? I mean, it looks cool and all. And we know that there was a bit of a fascination with the Imagineers, especially Tony Baxter with glass pyramids and things, if you look at early versions of the land. But if you don't follow Tom Morris on Twitter, I highly recommend it. He's an awesome retired Imagineer who is basically going into his files and like publishing stuff. And he revealed to us that the whole inspiration behind the pyramids here, that shape of the glass is a silver halide crystal seen through an electron microscope. It has that exact pyramid thing. Now Kodak, being a company that makes film that uses silver halide crystals in the film process, that tied it all together for them. So when you're looking at like, there's an actual real legitimate reason for that shape to exist. It's not just cool, which just blew my mind when we found out.
Now we haven't done an episode on Journey to Imagination, so we're not going to spoil all the good details that we've been researching and all that. We could be here all day talking about that ride. We know there was the original Journey into Imagination that opened a little bit after the park. The Image Works upstairs. That was one of the great play areas for kids, if you will, and adults. Everybody remembers the Rainbow Corridor and going through and conducting the music and all sorts of great stuff.
The pin table. Who did the pin table?
Remember that? Running your hand along?
I'll put my face in there.
Oh, you put your face? Oh, everybody else did. So we also had 3 different movies play here over the years. Who remembers the name of the very first one?
I do.
That's because Magic Journeys. That's because it was our audio rewind last month. And yeah, Magic Journeys was a 3-dimensional, one of the early 3D films to use the polarized glasses rather than the red and blue. It was children taking an interesting journey through their imagination, circuses and clouds and
ancient Egyptian pyramids and witches and kites.
As one of our listeners said, called it nightmare fuel. So it was interesting. And then along, what was it, 1985, 86, Captain EO, starring Michael Jackson, came along. And that's where the theater changed also so they could move. If you ever go into that theater, look carefully. There's brakes in the theater. When you step in, if you look along the line, you'll see a gap and there's a rubber gasket. That entire theater is on hydraulics. So even if you do the shorts today, you'll notice that the whole theater bounces up and down. And that was all part of the special effects to make the 4D theater. And that they carried that over into the shorts that are running today, which is pretty cool.
And there was one movie that never ran there that was shot for it. So when they were going to do Magic Journeys, they did not know if they would be able to deliver a final print on time. Because they were using new technologies, new cameras. So knowing that the ride wasn't going to make it, they were very concerned that there would be nothing to show in the theater. So they had the Dreamfinder, Ron Schneider, make a movie with, I'm trying to remember I don't remember the director's name off the top of my head, but he did this short film called The Wizard of Speed and Time in the late 1970s that won an Academy Award for like Best Short Subject. So that guy actually wrote and shot an entire film A lot of it was done actually just in the warehouses at WDI. There are little bits and pieces of it that have come out, but they actually shot this 20-minute movie to run here, and then Magic Journeys actually did make it on time, so it's never really been seen before.
That's right. That's right. Another interesting fact too, when you went up there was one of the Dreamfinder where you could act, Dreamfinder's drama school, where you could act with a green screen. Again, we can do green screen on our phones now. Back then you couldn't. You didn't have phones. So in that, as well as some other promotional clips, Joe Rohde played Dreamfinder as well in some of the early things, which if you've been to D23, you saw that last year, a year and a half ago.
Yeah. Oh, and we always talk about how, like, this all was done by a movie studio, a very small studio with a very small budget.
Yep.
And they couldn't do it. So, like, all of the people in those original, like, when you would sit in line and, like, watch the thing that, like, Dreamfinder sing, they didn't have a budget to go do stuff.
Right.
So, like, they basically said, like, hey, Joe, will you put on this costume and be this character? And they rounded up other Imagineers to be in the pre-show that showed the demonstration of how it worked. And they went to
the cowboys.
Yeah, right. And they just went to some warehouse and, like, set up the sets there and just did it on the fly very cheaply and very quick.
The drama school, if you guys remember, it would not pass today. There was the kids were shooting other people too. It was not. It wasn't. Yeah. It's not. Coach here would not work today.
So a couple of things more about the Imagination Pavilion. Normally we take you back to the back of the pavilion for two reasons. First, a lot of people know the bathrooms back there run the original background music loop for the pavilion.
As far as we know, it's still there.
It's still there.
You checked
the Magic Journey song and the original Imagination song and Making Memories all run, which was the Sherman Brothers pre-show for Magic Journeys, all run back there in a loop. And there's also, just at the point where cast members walk off stage, in the cement, when they poured new cement, they signed Figment's name in Figment's script.
No, we can do the mosaic.
Normally I take the group back there and let everybody kind of run back and take a peek, but Disney has set up a Share Your Ears wall back there. So there's a photo shoot with a PhotoPass photographer back there and about 10 times more people than are normally back there, which make it not a thing we can do. But one more thing to think about if you elect to use those bathrooms when the tour is over. If you remember when they opened the park, it took them almost another year to get Journey into Imagination open. They were behind schedule, and that was the pavilion that they were waiting on. And so every day, Tony Baxter, who was the lead designer, had a construction meeting with the crew, with all the leads, to say, okay, here's what we're getting done today, where are we at? And since the rest of the park was open and being used, they had the meeting every morning in the bathroom, because that was something that was finished and it was a place for them to be able to have the meeting.
You also may be wondering why the bathroom is where it is. It is a very odd spot. You do have to go all the way around the backside of the pavilion. But that area there between the land and Imagination was originally going to be a walkway for another pavilion potentially in the future. So that bathroom presented a great stop, and now it's just a lost little area in the back. So, I definitely invite you to go there and check it out.
A few other things.
The tile's original too, wasn't it? The tile? Yeah.
So I don't know if we're going to, I don't think there's...
Well, so we have a couple things to talk about over there. Yeah.
So I want to talk about between Imagination and the land. That's where the movie pavilion was supposed to go. Which basically was an entertainment pavilion. Michael Eisner saw the plans and heard about Universal Studios Orlando and said, can we make a whole theme park out of this? And they said, yes, we can. So essentially the Great Movie Ride was supposed to be an EPCOT pavilion right here. Between those two, the land that it was going to be built on is now taken up by the Soarin' Show building. So if you ever see an overhead, literally the entire Soarin' Ride building is smack dab between the land and Imagination, and that's why you have to walk 7.4 miles to get back to the land, or back to Soarin' when you ride it. I don't have anything else to say about that.
If you want to hear a bad story about the Imagination bathrooms, come see me as we're walking through.
Yeah, there's some things we can't repeat on this
tour. That's an infamous story.
Yeah.
So two other things. On the last tour, it was a much smaller group. We all went and got Disney Visa card photos, which they do in the old Figment's meeting place up there, between 1 and 7, I think, every day. We're not going to do that today because there's too many of us. We also had some kind DVC members take us upstairs to see the DVC lounge. So if you want to do that, see us at the end of the tour.
That's right.
None of us are members.
So some quick things about.
I got a question.
Oh, sure, bring it on.
I have a question about the theater.
Yes.
And the moving floor. Is that original, or did they add that?
So that was added for Honey, I Shrunk the Audience.
Yep.
But it's been in there for quite a while now, yeah.
I just really discovered it.
Yeah. For EO, they added all the lasers and the smoke effects when he crashed in the very beginning. The spaceship crashed, and they had some.
No, there wasn't. It was
low base.
Smoke, lights. Like there were a bunch of lasers.
Yeah.
I can't remember if there. I think there were some fiber optic stars like on the side. So when they would fade out to the star screen, there were some physical fiber optic stars in the room, and there was a blinking yellow light. Because when they found the beacon,
that's right.
Like that light would then light up within. And unfortunately, all that stuff was taken out. So when they brought Captain EO back, all of those effects were gone.
Right,
the big surprise is when the spaceship would crash and then the smoke would billow out into the first 3 rows of the theater. That was always a neat experience back then. Well, it just sat there, but I don't think they used it. Yeah, they just deprogrammed it for that time period.
All right, we're getting word from our cruise directors in the back that it's time to eat. So this is where we do wrap up the tour. So we have a couple quick things on the land. If you want to go up and see Walter Pergroy's, that's his mosaic design on the right-hand side. There is an interesting fact about it. If you can find, there is one mosaic tile that is different on each side. I won't tell you where it is, but if you want to know, you can email us later. So there's probably about, 10,000 tiles. So if you find,
quite a lot of work, yeah.
It's a lot of work, but I will tell you it's very close to the doors on one of the sides.
So he designed it, and then it was actually executed by a father-daughter team. And the daughter actually did the mosaic work on the Cinderella mosaics inside of the castle.
Right.
So, it's weird. The dad actually gets credit for doing the Cinderella one. The daughter actually did all the work. And then the two, because he was kind of like the big shot known for doing mosaics, and then they worked on that one together based on Walt Pergroy's designs.
Exactly. So there's a lot we could go on in the land. For the land and the seas, I think the best thing to do is, because there's so much about it, is go ahead and take a listen to our podcast episodes and that. There's some of the best ones I think we've done. We have Kitchen Cabaret. We've talked about the land in there. There's some great wall carpet in the old theater in there. You can take a look at where Symbiosis used to play. And one other note, if you are in the living seas, you go on Nemo. When you go into the Crush's tunnel, remember you go find Crush in the bubbles to go.
Right?
Yeah, you're on the EAC. That tunnel, if you look up carefully every now and then, when the blackout paper peels away, you can see the aquarium above you. That whole thing, you used to head straight down it, not turn to the left or the right, and you were surrounded by water. And that was unfortunately lost during the changeover. But this is the end of our tour. For those of you who were not on our tour yesterday, I have some postcards regarding our new poster that we put out. We are now officially a nonprofit. For those of you who might be following us, we're a nonprofit organization trying to keep the historical aspects of Disney and Lake Buena Vista together. So it's officially the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. So we do have a poster, and we have different varying levels of donations that you can get to us. We are working to continue to bring out and restore lots of these films, keep tours like this going. This is fun for us. We don't make any money off of this, and keeping the website going and everything we do. So I've got some postcards here, gives you some information. Please grab one, let your friends know. And the poster, just so you know, was drawn by
Jason. He's over
Jason.
there.
He's doing research again. There's Jason, the poster.
Wave, Jason.
That's Jason. He hand drew this poster. It's 24 by 36. It's of the Magic Kingdom and the surrounding 7 Seas and Bay Lake. And there's 71 hidden features. And if you go to our website, there's a contest coming up this week. And you'll have to find as many as you can. And so come on up and get that. And we thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. You can just pass it around if you want.
Good. Well,
It's a great problem to have.
it is a really good problem.
Bye-bye. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
I got your email about the paper.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that's my work that way. Yeah, I do all the tech stuff.
Todd, we're coming over to Sarah's and Bye.
All right, same here too. Yeah, we're gonna jet up there and get some.
Riley.
See you again, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.